This is a compilation of the most disturbing crimes that happened in a variety of fandoms, and let's start right away with the furry community. Nitro Lord, also known as NCrystal81 and Lore Bunny, was a 20-year-old Roblox YouTuber with over 150,000 subscribers and millions of views. He became known for making videos about the game's history, which quickly gained popularity during 2021. What his viewers didn't know though was that behind the screen, he was doing something that should have been never linked to a kid's game. In early May 2024, Nitro's Twitter account starts getting noticed, after a lot of people would catch him regularly interacting with highly inappropriate furry content. It's a strange thing to do, especially for someone with a young fanbase, but it's still nothing straight up illegal. However, something far more disturbing than that was discovered not long after. It turns out he also ran a second account named Lore Bunny, one that shows an even worse side of him. Completely different from the image he portrayed in his videos, on his alt account he would be found following both minors and explicit NSFW accounts at the same time, while also reposting disturbing material himself. Some of these posts would show suggestive drawings of human-like puppies with no clothes on. But what makes it even more alarming though is that his account was publicly linked to one of his Roblox alt accounts, meaning even his younger fans, by just going through his game profile, could have easily ended up seeing all of that. And it actually gets only worse from there. A Twitter user by the name of Schlep would discover that Nitro also ran a third account under the name Lil Pupcake, where he would repost even more disgusting things, like a cup in soiled diaper, as well as baby animals shown in deeply inappropriate positions. And with all of that already out in the open, it was only a matter of time before somebody stepped in. In September, a YouTuber named Reuben Sim would call Nitro out directly, confronting him over everything he'd been doing up to this point. Now in response to that, Nitro would actually post a public apology video on his YouTube channel, explaining that his actions were wrong and why they were wrong, and saying that it's important to protect minors from that kind of content. Now he doesn't really mention the more serious parts of the backlash, like how he directly linked his explicit Twitter accounts to one of his Roblox alts, where most of his fans are actually kids who could have easily found the things he posted. But nonetheless, the video makes it sound like he understands how messed up all of that was. And for a moment, it seems like the callout might have actually gotten through to him. But not long after, on a brand new account, Nitro and his girlfriend would announce that they were hosting an in-person furry party open to all ages, even though it included things that were completely inappropriate for children, like freaky adult-themed gear, and they were openly allowing minors to be around adults wearing these suggestive furry outfits, something that could easily go wrong. On a fall night in the bushes outside of a furry convention hosting what appears to be a freaky night, Nitro and his girlfriend were getting ready to host that very same event. An entire month had already passed since they first posted the ad, and despite everything that had come out, they decided to still go through with it. And yes, they would actually host the event on the night of November 1st, right outside Furry Apocalypse's Freak Show night. There aren't any pictures, videos or mentions of it anywhere, but Nitro would actually later admit to it directly in a live reaction video he posted in response to a documentary made about him in the same month. And in that clip, he actually tries to defend the decision to host an all-ages furry freak party.
The party didn't end up being that popular because it was like picked out at a spot that was kind of like secluded away from the hotel. Like the majority of the people that came to it were like people in me and my girlfriend's friend circle. They're all 18 and up. So I can promise you without a shadow of the doubt, there were no minors at this party.
After everything that had already been exposed about Nitro, it makes even less sense why he and his girlfriend would go forward with a party like that. It wasn't just the risk of minors seeing something inappropriate, it was the fact that they let them in the same space as adults wearing that kind of gear, knowing full well what kind of people that could bring in. And he later actually defended it by saying it was only promoted through his alt account and not on his YouTube channel. But that doesn't change the fact that the alt was already linked to him and the ad was pretty easy to find. In the end, no one was reported to be harmed, and while neither of them faced legal charges, what they planned was still reckless. This next case though had the police chasing after him.
Kiara's grandmother spoke with me today. She says all she wants to do is give her granddaughter a hug.
It's May 2nd, 2016. 16-year-old girl named Kiara Inman is reported missing from her home in Spokane, Washington. Right away, her entire family goes into a panic, and an Amber Alert is issued as soon as they're able to get it out. But not long after that, a note is found at her grandparents' house, telling them to not come looking for her, and saying that she isn't actually coming back, causing what would become her parents' worst nightmare. Now the question is, how did this even happen in the first place? Zachary Jones, better known online as Zello or the Wingless Forest Dragon, isn't what you'd call an ordinary 30-year-old guy. He identifies as someone who's into animals with human-like traits, and often posts artwork of them on various furry sites, along with photos of himself actually. And unfortunately, this is where he comes across Kiara, also known online as Ayana Wolf. It's not exactly clear how that conversation started, but users from the furry community would later discover a post Kiara made on April 23rd, where she shared her artwork and revealed they were in a relationship. And then, exactly 9 days later, on Sunday afternoon, Kiara willingly leaves her home on May 1st, telling her family she's meeting a friend. Now hours pass without a word from her, and even after an entire day goes by with no sign of where she went, her grandparents decide to issue an Amber Alert, and the police decide to begin searching for her.
As the hours tick by,
I keep trying to think of the positive things.
Sheila Breezes and her husband hope that the girl who painted these pictures will return home very soon.
Only after the news of her disappearance comes out, her parents somehow find out she'd met Zach online, and in the weeks leading up to her going missing, he'd been coaching her on how to leave her family behind and run away with him.
She left us a beautiful note telling us how much she loved us and that she knew this was going to be hard.
And after that, Kiara's family also discovered that both of them had been lying to each other about their age. Kiara actually claimed that she was 19, when in reality she was only. Zach, on the other hand, told her that he was 28, but he was actually a 30-year-old grown man. And on top of that, her parents know that Kiara is developmentally delayed and has the mentality of an 11-year-old, which makes it of course easier for Zach to manipulate her and gain her trust. Now the details start spreading online, and the entire situation actually causes a wave of controversy across the furry community. Many are frustrated that yet another predator was dragging the rest of them down with him. And one user named Ruben actually made a blog post about the case, saying that the focus should actually be on bringing Kiara home safely. But instead, it turned into a debate over who was really at fault. Ruben points out that even if Zach believed Kiara was 19, it still didn't excuse what he did, especially since her condition meant that she couldn't legally give consent in the first place. They say the moment he saw the Amber Alert, he should have gone straight to the authorities and explained his side. But instead, he kept driving and actually avoided the police. He even posted online asking for help with her liver medication, making things just worse. Zach had multiple chances to walk away, but chose to not take any of them. But finally, after 48 agonizing hours for Kiara's family, her parents would receive a call confirming that she's been found safe, over 2,200 miles away, at a rest stop west of Columbus, Ohio. She had been spotted by a state patrol officer during a routine check, where both she and Zach were found asleep in the car and said to be cooperating. Now once the family actually heard the news, they immediately rushed across the country to reach her. And when they finally do, they're overwhelmed with relief just seeing her again. And Kiara would actually be taken to the hospital to get checked out, while Zach is arrested on the spot and charged with kidnapping. Unlike him though, the next person did something even worse, and somehow got away with it.
The dog's name was Rigsby. He went missing on January 2nd. Now 18-year-old Wolfie is under investigation.
Back in early 2010, in San Antonio, Texas, a group of teenagers and young adults who believed they were wolves on the inside banded together to form something they called the Crimson Blood Wolf Pack, treating each other as a kind of wolf family. And for a while, everything seemed wholesome and fine, until their so-called alpha dog gets caught in one of the most gruesome crimes no one should ever think of doing: Wolfie Blackheart, also known as the leader of this pack, was an 18-year-old young woman who was actually known not just in her own group but by other packs around the San Antonio area. She had a gothic style and believed she was part wolf, and she even said she was allergic to silver, which is known to be a weakness of werewolves in fiction. And while she definitely came off as unusual, nothing really seemed wrong about that on the surface with what she was doing. That would change in January 2010 though. A photo would appear on 4chan showing an outstretched arm holding what looked like a dog's head, and the image would spread fast, causing a wave of attention toward where it came from and what led up to it. For those not familiar with the deeper parts of 4chan, it's actually well known that this site takes cases of animal abuse very seriously, and this case would be no exception. In response to this image, users would create an IRC chat room, which was basically an old school group chat, to figure out what really happened. With the help of EXIF data, which is hidden info stored in an image file, such as date, time, and sometimes even location, 4chan somehow managed to trace the possible source of the photo to Wolfie Blackheart and a few friends connected to the Crimson Blood Wolf pack. And from there, names and phone numbers would be uncovered, and before long, users began firing off a wave of calls and texts to those specific numbers, hoping somebody would just confess what actually happened, and they would actually push someone close to Wolfie to come forward with an explanation. This person went by the name of Razor, and he would join the IRC chat to post the following message.
Everyone, shut up for a second. I'm Russ. No one killed the dog. A truck running through my neighborhood ran him over. I tried to save him, but he died on the way to the vet. I'm the dog's caretaker. He was a stray. I took him in. I hate my friends for defiling the body. They beheaded it. The dog died in a car accident. They just messed with the body.
And even after this message, a phone call with Razor would reveal more about what happened. He claims the dog in question was a stray named Shadow, taken in by one of Wolfie's friends. And just like he said in the IRC chat, the story was that Shadow escaped their yard and unfortunately got hit by a car. And in the same call, he says that the body was handed off to a couple of friends to prepare for burial, but somewhere along the way they decided to keep the head. And with Wolfie, who really liked to collect animal skulls, it would eventually be given to her. Now, despite his confession, this could still be possibly a criminal case, so the users on 4chan actually dig up Razor's real name, and with everything they found, including the chat logs, they bring it all to the San Antonio police and the local news. Now, around this same time, things take another strange turn. A woman named Kathy Silva, who actually lived near Wolfie, would come forward, claiming that Shadow was actually her missing dog. According to her, his real name was Rigsby, and he disappeared from her backyard earlier that month. And this would actually cause some people to believe that the dog might have been stolen, but nothing was ever proven at the end of the day. If Kathy really was the owner, it's just as likely that Rigsby escaped on his own and was mistaken for a stray before ending up with Wolfie's group. Now, with all of that going around, the police would start looking into Wolfie directly. After finding out she owned multiple animal skulls and hearing that she may have been given the dog's body, it's enough to move forward with a search warrant. And once it's approved, officers go into her house immediately and begin the search. And inside they actually find what's left of the animal, just the skull, believed to be the removed head of Shadow or Rigsby, confirming that the photo wasn't a hoax after all. They also discover other clean skulls, such as of a sheep, a coyote, and a wild boar, revealing that cleaning skulls and keeping them had been her hobby long before this even happened. And this is also when the news stations actually chime in.
Sarah Rodriguez prefers to be called Wolfie. She wears a tail, a collar, and a harness. A group of people, mostly online, have accused her of beheading a dog.
And Wolfie responded to all of this, claiming that she didn't do anything illegal.
I didn't kill any animal. I wouldn't. Like I said, I'd be more likely to hurt a human than a dog any day. And even then, very, very, not really possible.
And she actually says that she's being harassed instead, and that people have even hacked into her online accounts.
They put child porn on my profile, a lot of bad, nasty stuff. I've been getting death threats, phone calls, a whole bunch of stuff.
And she speaks out several times to tell her side of the story, saying that she didn't remove the dog's head, but only after it was already passed away. She simply preserved the skull as a kind of spiritual keepsake for its current owner, who was also part of the same group.
I
did behead him. I didn't kill him. He was my friend. His name was Shadow. And he got hit by a car and they brought his corpse to me and they asked me to get his skull, so I did. But the owner's girlfriend took a picture of him and they put it online, and that's what caused all the fuss.
At the end of the raid, no animal abuse charges were filed, though the investigation was still ongoing. And despite the backlash, police didn't find anything that showed Wolfie had actually ended the dog's life. From what it looked like, they believed the story about Shadow being hit by a car, and there was nothing to suggest that the head was removed out of cruelty. With all that considered, the case would be closed and finally come to an end, with Wolfie stepping away from the public eye. This next person, however, is famous, but famous for all of the wrong things.
What is the age of consent for an animal? Please tell me. I really want to know. I'm on pins and needles.
Standards to an animal. A 15-year-old animal is not underage.
Sean Grace, otherwise known online as Quantum Kitty, was a former United States Marine in his mid-20s, and he often described himself as somebody with a deep dislike for human society and someone who had a disturbing attraction to animals. He wasn't known on the internet at first, but once his crimes started to surface publicly, it became clear where he went down as one of the most deranged figures in the furry community. And it all starts in early 2021, when Sean suddenly gets invited to an explicitly pro-zoo podcast called Zooer Than Thou, a show that openly attempts to justify and normalize relationships between humans and animals. And he would join as a guest and later become part of a network of people who actively defend, engage, and promote bestiality, which involves performing non-consensual acts on animals. Just to get an idea of what's going on the podcast, these are some of the things that Sean and the two other hosts were talking about.
Today we're centering our discussion on animal autonomy and speciesism, and for many of us on the podcast, it's the kind of discussion that leads to a certain worldview some find controversial.
You mean the part where we have sex with animals?
And what's controversial about that?
Now, disregarding this podcast, an earlier post actually starts to gain attention from him. Now, not long after, people from the furry community would begin to go after him directly because they didn't want to be associated with Sean. Two of these people being known as Coyote Lovely and Relly, and they would actually manage to get into a Discord call with Sean to confront him about the things he's been doing online, which actually included allegedly sending bestiality content to people not of age.
It showed one of these Schrodinger accounts actually sending a cat or an animal of sorts having sexual intercourse or about to have sexual intercourse with a human with the tagline, "How does this not look like consent?" or something along those lines. Was that you?
Yes, that was me.
And when asked about it, Sean says that he only sent the content as part of an argument. He explains that he had been debating those people that were not of age on whether dogs could consent or not, and says that the content was meant to prove that they could.
This wasn't just some person I saw on Twitter opened up the DMs and sent them dog porn. This was someone I was having a debate with, and of course they were making, the argument animals can't consent, they don't want to do it, it's all rape. And I found this specific video where the dog is very clearly and engaged in it. I sent this video as evidence and I said, look at this video, this dog is clearly enjoying it. Then they just freaked out, ew, gross, blah blah blah.
And as the call goes on, the two just keep pushing back on his beliefs, but Sean would still argue and go as far as comparing fully developed animals to children, claiming that animals were ready for intimate contact while children clearly weren't.
You're equating fully developed animals who are fully developed to engage in interaction to children who are absolutely not.
And after that, he says that he wouldn't dare be physically involved with what he calls underage animals.
If you actually go pick up a puppy from the pound and then wait until it's old enough to have sex with it, does that make you an orbiter as well? Or were you a pet? Like, what is that?
Well, considering I don't have sex with underage animals, no, I'm not a pet.
Now, for quite some time, there have actually been allegations floating around about Sean, and those allegations were sending explicit content to minors. And this would actually turn out to be a fact. It turns out he's not only been sharing graphic material involving non-consensual acts with animals, but he was also leaking personal information of one of the minors to other people.
He sent it to several minors, including me. He saved and posted a photo of me without my consent. So now not only has he sent me bestiality, he saved a photo of me and posted it as his argument with someone else.
While that alone is already disturbing and definitely illegal, a later post would reveal Sean's disgusting and depraved actions towards animals that makes the situation 1,000 times worse. In late December of 2021, a former friend of Sean by the name of Wintergreen decides to actually expose him for his actions. After getting so sick of him saying and doing things no person should ever even be capable of thinking about, Wintergreen starts claiming that
Quantum also took a young deer's body, stuffed it in his fridge, and had relations with it for 3 days. He's had consistent bloodstains left in his house from engaging with the deer corpses, and his one regret was a rotting raccoon that he engaged with. Quantum is He's even been looked into by the feds for sending explicit material to kids. A 40-year-old's dick for a job too. Told me once his puppy wet the bed or floor or something, and Quantum dare near threw him, slapped him apparently. Quantum apparently has no firearm discipline either. Last time Redacted and Quantum got together, he was acting like a Billy Badass with his AR, had a loaded mag gun, non-chambered, and had the flash suppressor pointed at the dog's head.
These claims, along with other messages talking about Sean's cruel actions, would be confirmed by yet another set of screenshots, showing messages Sean had sent to another acquaintance of his through Telegram, Zerkalo. In them, Sean would just straight up admit, as a teenager he was sadistic toward both animals and people. He talks about hurting a family dog so bad it lost consciousness, then lying to his parents about it. He also confesses to physically attacking his disabled brother out of pure frustration, just because he was angry at a mere video game. And this still isn't the end of his message. In the same conversation, Sean admits that starting in 2018, he'd done unspeakable things to the remains of the deer he found along the roadside. He says it happened dozens of times. He would sometimes even drag the bodies into the woods, sometimes into his car, and sometimes even into his house. And in one case, he kept a deer in his fridge for 2 days, so he could continue doing what he did to it. And he talks about how hard it was to be even near it after a while because the stench got so bad. He actually had to wear a respirator just to stay in the same room. And he also mentions a fox, saying that it wasn't actually for him, but for someone else who had asked him to bring it back so they could keep parts of it. And he also casually just admits violating a friend's dog without the friend's knowledge, insisting that the dog didn't need anyone's permission. Now fortunately, it was only a matter of time before the police got involved, after all the gut-wrenching things Sean had done. In June of 2022, neighbors began contacting the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office about a foul stench coming from his property. Some even claimed that they saw piles of bones, while others mentioned dead animals and burn pits. And eventually, deputies arrived with a search warrant, and what they found was worse than they expected. Animal remains were scattered across the yard in various stages of decay, so they seized his phone as evidence, and when investigators examined its contents, they uncovered that Sean had filmed himself committing acts of abuse with his dog. And even more disturbing, he didn't just keep the footage, he shared it with others online and even invited people to take part. But on August 20th, 2024, Sean Grace was convicted of distributing obscene material, possession with intent to distribute, and 2 counts of aggravated animal cruelty. Then on October 1st, he was finally sentenced to 7 years in prison. This next case though wasn't just one person. An entire group traumatized a little boy.
We have uncovered a ring of grown men who have been a young boy over the period of the last 7 years.
It's early 2016. A 38-year-old man named David Parker would come under investigation after a case is filed accusing him of ongoing predatory acts against a child. At first, it seems like the typical case of a deranged person being locked up and getting what they deserve, until the victim, who we'll call Simon from now on, says something that changes everything. Simon wasn't just being taken advantage of by David, but he would talk about being taken to group meetups, where he was harmed in deeply inappropriate ways by multiple men while they wore fursuits, which are these animal costumes. And he names several names, including Kenneth Fenske, who was 57 at the time, and Craig Michael Knox, who was 35 during the same period. And he gives the investigators the entire timeline of when it all started and how it ended, going all the way back to 2009. Simon is 9 years old when David brings him to a house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Inside, there's already a group of men gathered, most of them wearing full-body animal suits and calling themselves furries. And as soon as they walk in, one of them, dressed as a red fox and going by the name of Lupine, approaches Simon, takes him upstairs, and proceeds to do unimaginable things. And back in 2016, with Simon's testimony and investigation underway, police would eventually confirm that the man who called himself Lupine was actually Kenneth. And the house Simon has been taken to in 2009 turns out to be Kenneth's own home, where those group meetups had taken place. Now Kenneth and David actually get arrested, but one of the names Simon gave, Craig, still hasn't been looked into, but he would also come under investigation soon enough. And according to Simon, Craig was actually the most disturbing member of the group. He even took him to a house in Pittston, a different part of Pennsylvania where most of the taking advantage of happened. And Simon tells them that before he even turned 13, David had taken him to other homes and apartments where more adults took advantage of him in the same way. Now fortunately, Craig gets investigated and the police successfully raid his home, and they don't just find evidence of child endangerment, they actually find another person, his roommate, a 30-year-old man named Stephen Taylor, who would also be arrested and charged with bestiality. And later during questioning, Craig admits that David had actually encouraged him to have at it with Simon. He tells them he took Simon to an upstairs bedroom and defiled him there, and that afterward David forced the boy to perform explicit acts on him as well. And the police actually arrest yet another man, 40-year-old Jeffrey Harvey, in an undercover operation, posing as a 13-year-old. An investigator arranged to meet him, which led to his attempt to engage in inappropriate acts. And during the interrogation of him, Jeffrey would surprisingly hand over texts that he exchanged with David, messages in which he admits wanting to be intimate with both David and Simon. Simon, on the other hand, would enter foster care and begin therapy, while all 5 men would be behind bars for crimes that went on for over 7 years. But somehow what comes next is even worse and far more dangerous.
Seta shared photos of Pernas adopting a black puppy from one of their charity events, the same black puppy from a charity event that Wolf mutilated and butchered.
On September 16, 2018, Pseudonym, a person or volunteer who took it up upon themselves to investigate and expose people involved in would post a Twitter thread exposing several names connected to the so-called Zoo Zadist Telegram groups. While many of the people listed had already done horrifying things that most would consider criminal, readers would soon notice one name that stood out. This was someone whose actions went far beyond the rest. Ruben Marrero Pernas, better known online as Wolf SS, or as most people know him as Wolf. He is a 36-year-old man living in Cuba. He is actually a highly educated guy working at the Cuban Neuroscience Center. But in January 2018, Wolf, or Ruben, would start speaking with another Zoo Zadist on Telegram, going by the name of Snake Thing, the same person I covered in the first Furry Crimes video. In their chats, he shared photos and stories about the horrific things he inflicted on dogs and puppies alike. And at one point, he even told Snake Thing that he made a wooden stake covered in honey to attract fire ants, and once it was swarming with them, he would use it to hurt dogs. Snake Thing would later spread these logs to others, bringing even more attention to what Wolf had done. And for a while, it looked like Wolf's crimes would stay buried, until 7 months later when Pseudonym decided to publish the Zoo Zadist leaks. His content wasn't just violent, but it showed a level of sadism that most people didn't even think was possible. But But unlike the others, he left behind almost nothing that could tie it back to him personally, with the only details being that he spoke Spanish, worked with electrical equipment, and had once used the alias Work. His messages gave the furry community almost nothing to work with. They wanted to find out who this person was, and so they would begin digging through the photos he shared, hoping they could identify and report it. Some people tried analyzing the plants in the background, although that didn't lead anywhere, so their attention actually shifted to one particular photo, showing an ice cream parlor near where he worked, and the tablecloth of that photo looked very specific, very unusual. And one of the flavors actually was apple, which was rare enough so they could identify the shop and narrow down where he was located. The parlor seemed like a small local store, and over the next few days, people began messaging ice cream parlors and bakeries across the United States. Now there was at least one innocent shop that was falsely accused, but they eventually found the right one. The shop was Himalaya Habana, an ice cream parlor in Havana, Cuba. And with that confirmed, people started searching through bestiality forums looking for a Cuban user with matching interests and behavior. And they eventually found a man on a certain website called Beast Forum using the name Wolf SS. Wolf SS uploaded several videos of himself harming his own dogs, mostly Rottweilers, and on his profile was the email address wolf.schwartz39, which brought up a Google account under the name Wolf Schwartz, almost identical to the alias Work Schwartz he once used while commenting on the memorial page of another zoo sadist. Now, not long after, on a platform called Agregame, they found photos of the exact same man, who could be seen in several of the Wolf SS videos posted to Beast forums. Now, even with that, the community searching through the photos weren't fully convinced. So they decided to take a shot in the dark and emailed both addresses linked to Wolf, and to their surprise, he actually responded. And in the email, he wouldn't deny doing all of these things that he'd been accused of, and he would actually be convinced to join a Telegram group chat where he would drop a text document containing 4,000 words written entirely by him, and in that text message, he begged to not have his name exposed. He blamed everything on other people and even cried about his broken soul, and went on about times he's been nice to dogs. But not once did he even acknowledge what he actually did. It was clear he had no actual remorse for what he'd done. Instead, he tried to present himself as some kind of sympathetic victim. But with the new email confirmed to be his, there was no question anymore. Wolf, Schwarzweiler, Wolf SS, and every other pseudonym he used were all tied to the same man, Ruben Marrero Pernas. And after that, the community who investigated him compiled everything into a PDF and uploaded it to 8chan. They included his name, his address, and the videos and the photos of him. Everything was in it, an entire docs. And with that kind of proof, it looked like Wolf would finally be put behind bars. But there was one problem. Cuba didn't have any laws against animal abuse or bestiality, or even the most basic form of cruelty. No matter how much evidence they actually would turn in, the authorities had no power to act. So despite everything, it looks like Ruben would stay free and able to keep hurting dogs with no real consequences. That is until someone by the name of Steinball928 reached out to Cubanos on Defensa de los Animales, or CEDA, a Cuban animal rights group. They were given every piece of evidence collected on Wolf so far, and 2 months later, in November 2018, CEDA would respond with a public statement.
With deep pain and outrage, she posted information that was sent with sufficient evidence of its veracity. So with full responsibility, and after trying to channel it through the corresponding channels without success, today we report the citizen Ruben Marrero Pernas, 29 years old and worker until now of the scientific pole, responded to a call from CEDA to rescue a 2-month-old puppy in the month of April. The puppy was abandoned in the street in central Havana in a pile of garbage. Unfortunately, this individual, after adopting the puppy, tortured, mutilated, and killed her days later in a way that's hard to believe that a human being can do.
They continued by confirming CEDA had graphic proof of Ruben's actions, and it wasn't limited to just one dog. More evidence showed he'd conflicted extreme harm on others, then posted photos and videos online, some coming from outside Cuba. And at the time of their post, Ruben was still free, walking on the streets of Havana. And based on everything they'd seen, CEDA believed he would do it again. And so they tried to warn the public. They released his photos alongside one of the puppies he brutally harmed to make sure everyone knew exactly who he was and what he'd done. The statement also mentioned his involvement in PAC activities, a Cuban animal rescue group, which means he was actually still trying to get closer to more animals. So CEDA urged every protection group and concerned citizen to share his face and spread the warning before more poor dogs suffered the same fate. This news actually enraged the Cuban citizens, many of whom actually called for justice, and the police would eventually respond to the pressure after CEDA and other animal rights groups went public with all the information on him, and his dogs would actually be rescued by the Cuban Dog Tails Rescue, and officers would uncover bones and remains of dogs buried near his home, and as a result, Wolf would get fired and placed in police custody. But just as everybody feared, he wouldn't stay there for long. Cuba still has no laws to charge him under, and despite all the evidence, they would simply have to let him go. On December 20th, 2018, CEDA would then post another warning to keep the public alert.
Let's not forget that Ruben, Marrero, Pernas and others like him are still on the streets, following animal groups and causing harm to the animals we try to protect. Rumor has it he has contact with dogs again.
And after that, Slimeball, the person who first exposed him, would reveal more information about him, saying that some of Ruben's friends were actually already trying to get back his dogs, even though his face could be clearly seen in the footage of what he did to them. And around the same time, 2 dogs would actually be found dumped in a river near Ruben's house. Now there was no way to confirm or deny if he was behind it, but the timing and location just made people suspicious. And while researching this video, Slimeball actually posted this.
Wolf was caught out trying to procure a puppy from a new rescue not far from his house just last week. The lady running it didn't know him, but she said something was off and contacted CEDA.
And despite everything held against him, he still is a free man. Now he stayed a free man until January, where Slimeball would announce that Ruben was pending trial despite being released. No further updates would come out since. And because of this huge public outrage, on April 7th, 2019, hundreds of Cuban citizens would actually march for animal rights. It was the first protest in the country's history that wasn't run or backed by the government, and for many it was the only way they could fight back against people like Ruben. But even after all of this, Ruben still isn't actually in prison. And let's move on to the most disturbing case of this video.
From the cutting dogs open and their entrails while they were still alive and screaming in pain habit that he has developed.
It's the fall of 2016. Levi Dane Simmons, who will also meet online as Snake Thing, is a 21-year-old man from Oregon. He arrives at a local Motel 6 with a 12-year-old bully mixed puppy, just recently adopted off of Craigslist. Levi rents the room for the night with the puppy inside and does something to her that's absolutely horrifying. This single act would later spark the most disturbing expose of abuse against animals in internet history. But Levi isn't alone. His low wage isn't actually enough to afford a puppy, let alone rent a motel. He doesn't have a car or even a license to get there. There's one person who helps him, and he is somebody who's been plaguing the Pacific Northwest for almost half a century, harming small animals with cruelty and brutality. Timothy George Amoroso, otherwise known online as Timwin or Dog Dude. He is a 64-year-old man from Washington, and his online activity actually goes all the way back to the 90s. During the early days of the internet, especially in and bestiality-based Usenet groups like Alt Bestiality, he was seen often using the name Dog Dude, and sometimes even actually attached his real name to the posts. Now in these group chats, he would lay out instructions on how to engage with female dogs, and share stories of his own that he enjoyed, and connect with others who were also disturbingly interested in animals the same way he was. Now over the following years, he would attend meetups across the West Coast, presenting himself both in person and online as just an ordinary guy who loves animals. But at one point he would even express a deep attachment to a golden red puppy he received back in 1996. But behind all of it, Tim has already developed an obsession with causing pain and suffering, and his animal victims would stay conscious, throughout all the torture, visibly distressed, and some wouldn't even survive what he put them through. However, even that wouldn't stop him from continuing to feed his sadistic desires. With cameras and editing software on the rise, he would begin producing disturbing videos of animal cruelty, sometimes even working with other zoo sadists to record himself, inflicting suffering on animals. Back in 1998, for example, he gets together with an unknown man and produces one of the most infamous pieces of work, Hung. The video starts with a dog hanging from a tree in the middle of the woods. Her body twitches for a couple of seconds before the video cuts again. This time, however, she's no longer moving, still hanging there. A man then walks into the frame and does something deeply disturbing. You can probably imagine what it might be. And as internet technology actually advanced, in the early 2000s, Tim would begin to share explicit content regarding bestiality under a different alias of his, Rainsters. And surprisingly, it wouldn't take long for him to become somewhat known for a set of disgusting videos involving a Labrador named Chunky. In one of his posts at the time, he would even say this:
"Here's a famous yellow Labrador."
And in parentheses, porn star.
"And a friend. She reminds me about Chunky from Pet Lab. Is it her? Yes, I own her. She is very sweet. Sweet star."
And he would just continue torturing puppies and filming it throughout his anonymous accounts, which would lead to his videos spreading widely across the internet, until a group of vigilantes whose goal is to target sadists within the community connects this footage back to the name Rainsters, and actually to him as Tim. And they corner him into confessing, and he actually folds immediately. He tells them he will stop, and in response, they let him go. The event isn't well documented online, but the only reason we know it happened is because not long after, Tim would just go right back to harming puppies, which unsurprisingly just ends with him being caught online once again. But this time, the person who finds him is actually another bestiality advocate named Douglas Spink, also known as Fausty.
"You were given a second chance in 2009 when we caught you doing this horrific shit again. Some, like me, were opposed. You made promises and promises, promises. We warned you that if you ever got even near another dog, you were done. No excuses, no third chances, no free passes. With the whole murdering, torturing puppies thing. Zero."
And this event turned Tim around. He would drop the name Rainsters and disappear from the internet. Is something I would like to say, but unfortunately this isn't the end either. It would be about 4 years before he shows up again, this time bringing his disturbing activity to a new platform, Reddit. In September 2014, he opens an account under the alias MatePups, and his posting history would revolve entirely around a subreddit he created and constantly promoted, called r/innocent victim reports. At first glance, it seems like a true crime page, just focused on news stories involving children and sometimes animals. But the first sentence of the page's description makes it immediately clear something is very twisted about this.
"This is for those that like to follow the news articles of the abuse of innocent prey."
And this isn't even the disturbing part though. Tim would advertise this very subreddit on violent roleplay pages like r/struggle, which centered around non-consensual fantasy scenarios. It turns out r/innocent victim reports is his own public collection of real cases involving children in horrific situations, which he actually collects and obsesses over for disturbing purposes. His sadism isn't limited to animals anymore. He now wants to carry out depraved acts on anyone and anything too weak to fight back. Now, for reasons that still aren't clear, Tim leaves the MatePups account in May 2015 and then returns later the same year under a new name, Dogslot. And with his new account, he becomes even more blatant about his obsession with causing harm, continuing to post on his own subreddit r/innocent victim reports with increasingly gruesome and seemingly racist titles. And he actually created another subreddit called r/dead dogs.
New animal sub, PM me if you like the use of animals. I do find dead dogs and puppies very.
For the most part, Tim's public sadism posts are only noticed by a handful of disgusted users. One Redditor, however, isn't sickened, but instead intrigued, and starts trying to make contact with him.
"I'm so happy that I pushed us to becoming friends on Reddit. I'm so happy I met you. Yeah, Reddit. Who would have thunk it? I know, right? It's quite the amazing coincidence.
Now, prior to meeting Tim in 2016, Levi actually never had the chance to act on his sadistic ideas of hurting an animal. He lived with his family and couldn't drive since he was legally blind. But Tim was his vehicle. He had decades of experience, a car, and long-standing eagerness to help others to harm animals. And by coincidence, the two lived just 5 hours apart, which meant that they could now carry out their twisted fantasies together. And as you know, in the fall of 2016, that possibility became real. They purchased a female puppy off of Craigslist and took her to the Motel 6. And they would do these disturbing things to this puppy. Although the original plan was to end the life of the puppy once they were done, Levi couldn't actually bring himself to do it after looking into her eyes. So instead, they decided to take her and leave her in an unknown location somewhere in the county. Now, the following days after that, the two of them would try again and again to get another puppy to take advantage of. But then out of nowhere, Levi decided to ask Tim one question.
Have you thought of any ideas as well, by the way, as to what we should do with the toys?
And then Tim gives a graphic description of what he plans to do. Now, shortly after that, in between plotting to use another puppy, Tim would ask Levi to get him into Zoo-Zadim chats on Telegram, where many other infamous furry criminals were active. And in exchange, he offers sadistic child predator chats from the darknet and agrees to help Levi gain access to Animal's Dark Paradise, a Zoo-Zadim focused Telegram group chat. Now time passes, and Levi keeps spreading the footage he and Tim made in 2016. And eventually, vigilantes like Shadow Wolf and Pseudonym would find these videos and trace everything back to him, which meant that finally on September 14, 2018, Levi would get cornered by the two vigilantes. And everything he does in the next few days will lead to his arrest on charges related to animal cruelty. Tim, however, never gets charged with anything. Shadow Wolf and Pseudonym, for reasons still unclear, weren't able to hand over what they had on him to the police. Instead, they would send all the evidence to the FBI at a later time. But that doesn't change the fact that they stopped the one investigation that had the best chance of putting Tim in prison. Now in April 2019, Douglas, the same guy who let Tim off 10 years ago, gets contacted directly by people involved in the Zoo-Zadim expose. And as their conversations would go on, Douglas would slowly realize that Tim was actually involved, which leads to Douglas actually trying to catch Tim again, since he warned him already. But that is when Tim's internet activity would suddenly disappear. Now normally going silent is common, especially for people who know others are out to expose them. But Tim's disappearance didn't make any sense at all. He didn't go quiet until months after that came out. But then after 4 months, in November 2019, Tim would send an email to Togglerad, the co-host of Douglas' podcast, Zooer Than Thou.
Please let Doug know that I am under a LEO,
law enforcement officer,
investigation. I hope he can now rest better for his remaining days. I'm in a recovery program and have been for some time. I know that means nothing because of the damage and destruction I've done in my life. Not sure how I will go out, but it is soon. Regards.
Now this wasn't even it. People actually find out that Tim created another Reddit account called Up For Anything 985. Also using the name Muddling. And he actually made a post in the subreddit r/offender support asking for advice about treatment options for his obsessions.
Hi, I have for over 40 years have done behaviors that are deviant. I wish not to have the desires or compulsions anymore. At the very least, I need the tools to stop. I've been trying to find counseling for my issue. Twice I was told and referred to seek offender treatment. Is it possible to get into a program voluntarily? Everything I've researched says it's for a person that have been convicted of an offense.
He would then also make another post on a similar subreddit, this time looking for more help with his urges.
I'm an addict. I've acted out in very bad ways. I'm in an SA group and have some 3 weeks of sobriety. I've hurt so many animals from acting out that there's no way the members or God will accept me. It hurts too much. I'll just send it if that comes to pass. This is my last chance to fit in.
Douglas was actually somehow trying to end his compulsions, either through treatment, religion, or even death. But in the end, none of that happened. On December 10th, 2019, just 6 days after Levi gets arrested, Tim shares a news story about a 12-week-old puppy that had been hurt and dumped by the roadside in Boston, reminding everyone he's still free and still out to cause as much pain as he can. Once again, he broke his promises and went back to his old ways. A month later, Tim would be found following Tekida, another zoo sadist, on Ink Bunny, a furry community website, showing he fully intends to keep going. And with no charges filed, Tim would once again slip through the cracks, facing no legal consequences. Now let's move on to the community of K-pop. It's the mid-late 90s. Ibon is a famous singer and actress. She worked her way up to celebrity status by first appearing in multiple TV dramas and then transitioned into the music industry, where she debuted as an idol, which is pretty much just a K-pop singer. She has a really strong fan base and is at the height of her success, which would inevitably have its horrifying downsides. Ibon is just filming for one of her projects like any other day, when she notices that the weather got pretty cold. It is autumn after all. She has about 20 minutes of filming left before she's able to go home, so her manager goes to her car to turn on the engine.
아니요, 그때 촬영이 끝나고 좀 날씨가 추웠어요. 추워서 차를 이제 좀 시동을 걸어놓고.
And after the 20 minutes pass, Ibon is ready to wind down and go home. She walks down this long staircase to get to her car, when suddenly everything goes dark. It's not until the next day that she wakes up again, and she isn't in the car nor at her house. She's in a room that she doesn't recognize.
그리고 나서 아침에 눈을 딱 떴어요. 내 방이 아닌 거야.
There's nobody around her. She didn't drink or anything, so why can't she remember where she was? And then Ibon realizes the dark truth. She had been kidnapped and most likely spiked. And then she hears a voice. Why did you bring her and cause all of this trouble? The kidnapper and somebody else were having a conversation, but it doesn't seem like they want to do something bad to Ibon. So she stands up and walks up to them, not knowing what would happen next. The person who just kidnapped her tells Ibon that he did what he did because his brother is a huge fan of hers. They were saesang fans. People who go to extreme lengths. They kidnap, they film and break into private property just to get the chance to talk to their celebrities, or in this case, idols. After Ibon realized that they were just fans, she doesn't actually contact the police. Instead, she actually asks them to show her around the neighborhood. She doesn't think of them as active threats anymore, and so she spends a couple of hours with them and is eventually actually able to leave without being harmed anymore. The next day, Ibon is recovering from this shocking and bizarre situation when she sees a yellow luxury sports car parked in front of her house. It's a gift from the fans, and they actually propose to her, but obviously she just rejects them and is finally able to move on. She got away unharmed, which is unfortunately not the case for 13-year-old Xiao. November 8th, 2013 should have been just another school day for her. But even though she lived in Beijing, her obsession for K-pop would cost her her life that very day. Xiao started off as an excellent student. She managed to get into an extremely prestigious middle school that was known for its top-tier students. And even among her elite peers, she still managed to do pretty well. Her dad, Lee, was extremely proud of that fact. He only had a primary school education, and since his wife was disabled and mostly hospitalized, their financial situation was always very difficult. Their main source of income was a living allowance from their grandparents. The fact that Xiao was working towards a great diploma just meant that she had a ticket to a better life. It was normal for her to live in the school dorms, and she would just return to her home every Saturday to be with the family. But as time passed, Xiao would suddenly start spending more and more time on the computer when she was home. She would stay up until late at night. Her father didn't pay attention to it at first, but it did worry Lee just a tiny bit. Once the new school semester rolled around though, things started changing dramatically. Xiaoping decided she would no longer live in the dorms, but instead live at home full-time again and just get a taxi to school every day. The taxi fees weren't gonna be cheap, but if that meant that Xiaoping would be able to focus on her studies better, so be it. Lee just complied. But this is when everything started falling apart. Xiaoping spent more and more time on her computer, and her grades began to slip. Lee didn't know what was going on. What did she actually do on that computer that consumed all of her living hours? What was actually more important than her grades and her future? So one night, he took a peek and found out that she was obsessed with the K-pop group EXO. She spent all of her waking hours promoting this K-pop group. All she did was engage with posts, listen to their songs, and other various things to get the group ranked higher on the music charts, which is a common thing for K-pop groups to encourage. It is often so that fan clubs are established by agencies and companies to purposefully influence their fans to complete certain tasks, such as writing comments, listening to their music X amounts of times, and doing other things. And Xiaoping was in the midst of it all. The more she supported EXO, the more status she would also gain within her own fan group. She would be so active, matter of fact, that she would even become somewhat of a role model and leader in her small circle of supporters. Lee was completely overwhelmed by this fact. It seems like his daughter has lost all of her drive and ambition just to support this boy band. But he didn't know how to talk to her, so he just gave in, at least for now. On October 19th, 2013, EXO was going to hold a concert in Beijing, which naturally prompted Xiaoping to ask her father for tickets. They cost around 1,200 yuan, or $160. This was Lee's monthly salary, but he actually agreed. It was the thing that would make his daughter happy after all. However, Xiaoping didn't just ask for one ticket. She asked for another 1,200 yuan to buy a ticket for another fan. Since she was the leader of her small fan circle, she had to provide when they couldn't. This was unimaginable for Lee. 1,200 yuan was already a huge amount of money, and she now wanted to buy a ticket for somebody she barely knew, so he simply refused. But that didn't stop Xiaoping from getting what she wanted. She decided to go to her grandparents for the money. They surely couldn't say no to their own granddaughter. And she was right. Her grandparents gave her the money, and she just went behind her own father's back for it. This was the first real crack in their relationship. It's 7 AM, and it's been a couple of weeks since she attended EXO's concert. Today is one of Xiaoping's most important days of her life. She is going to write her entrance exam that would quite literally decide her future. Lee asks Xiaoping to get ready and goes down to call her a taxi as always. But 10 whole minutes pass and Xiaoping is still in her room. Lee calls her again, but it just seems like she has no intention of listening to her father today. The taxi driver actually leaves, taking the money and leaving Lee embarrassed. He is furious. This is the second crack of their relationship. He goes upstairs and opens the door, only to find Xiaoping at her computer. Her books are all over the floor. Everything is messy and she's not ready to go anywhere. Xiaoping is still doing her daily tasks to support EXO. Lee is yelling at her and tells her that she's obsessed with celebrities that don't even know or care for her. She thinks about her idols more than her own future. This sentence absolutely breaks Lee. He snaps. He goes to the kitchen and picks up a knife. He wants to scare her with it, but then she does something that just spirals the entire situation out of control. She hits him and says, "Idols are better parents than you." And just a few minutes later, by the time Lee comes back to his senses, his daughter is motionless on the ground. He lost one of the only people he truly cared for. He drops the knife and picks up the phone to turn himself in. In April of 2014, Lee was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with his final statement being, "I wish I could go back in time to play with my daughter again, but it's irreparable." September 23rd, 2016, South Korea. A young woman walks into a police station. She's here to report a crime. Her ex-boyfriend filmed molka, a term that refers to taking videos of women without their knowledge or consent.
일단 몰카라는 단어는 한국에만 있는 단어고 정확한 워딩은 불법 촬영물이라는 건데요. 여성이 인지하지 못하는 상황에서 본인이 수치심을 느낄 만한 상황을 카메라로 담고
According to her, they had slept together when she caught him, taking videos of her during the act.
실제로 몰카가 일어날 수 있는 곳은 너무나 많고요. 연인 사이에 찍을 수 있는 것, 누군가의 인생을 망가뜨리기 위해서 이 몰카를 찍어서 유포를 할 수 있는 그런 것들이 있고
2 days later, the ex-boyfriend is questioned by the police. They want to take a look at his phone, but he refuses. Instead, he calls his lawyer and leaves his phone with a private forensics company. They are supposed to see if he did indeed film his girlfriend. An IT specialist gets this phone on his desk. We will call him Lee. Lee's mission is to recover every single thing this phone ever stored, and he's pretty good at his job. He recovers a lot of data, over 200,000 text messages, countless videos and photos. If there was any evidence the police needed, the phone would have it now. But then Lee gets a call from the lawyer.
경찰하고는 얘기는 됐고 좀 있으면 가실 건데 지금 전화드린 이유가 저희로서도 복원이 되든 안 되든 상관이 전혀 없는데 경찰에서는 차라리 복원 불가가 오히려 나을 것 같다라고 지금 말씀을 하셔서 그렇거든요. 이게 그냥 쓸데없는 고소 사건이 돼나가지고.
But that is not it. The lawyer says that the ex-girlfriend dropped all of the charges anyway. She was just angry and lashed out on him. There was no evidence that the ex-boyfriend was a criminal in any way, but Lee knows the truth. He was just unwillingly dragged into one of the darkest and most disturbing secrets of South Korea. He sees thousands of pictures and videos of unconscious women being SA'd, whole group chats of people making fun of that fact, and people discussing the prices for one night with these women, catalogs of them for sale. Lee is sure that this is some kind of organized crime ring that nobody knows about. People that operate in the dark doing these despicable crimes. That is until he looks at the names of the members of the group chat and he recognizes every single one. The phone belongs to Jang Jay-young, a multi-talented, famous singer, actor, and TV personality.
Rock and roll!
He is this edgy, popular guy that girls drool over, and he's in this group chat, posting pictures of unconscious women and even more disturbing things. But he isn't the only famous person in this group. Almost every single one is a celebrity of some sorts. Lee Jang-young, guitarist of CN Blue, Choi Chang-hoon, leader and guitarist of FT Island, and Lee Sang-young, also called Sung-yi, a member of the boy band Big Bang. All of them are world stars. The entirety of South Korea loves them, idolizes them, and all of them are actively participating in human trafficking.
최종훈은 그 안에서 물론 정준영과 마찬가지로 여자를 너무너무 밝히는 모습이었지만
Lee looks through everything and sees them joking about gang SAing a singular woman the night before they did a fan meeting. But that isn't the only vile thing he notices. The celebrities mention that they have higher ups of the police on their side. They're all in on it.
FT 아일랜드 최종훈이 음주운전을 했는데 그 음주운전을 어떤 경찰이 막아줬다라는 내용이 눈에 띈 거였어요. 사실 저는 그 내용을 보고 정말 다리가 떨릴 정도로 깜짝 놀랐었거든요.
He doesn't know what to do, and so he returns the phone and closes the case by saying that he wasn't able to restore any data. But not before he makes a copy of every single text message, photo, and video that would later expose one of the biggest scandals in Korean entertainment history. 2018, Sung-yi, the member of the boy band Big Bang I already mentioned, is absolutely huge in Korea. If not for his music, he's known for his incredibly fancy and insane parties. His nickname is the Great Gatsby. He throws events that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and takes Korea by storm with his new image. But if you aren't a celebrity, there's simply no way you can attend one of his great parties. Until February 23rd, 2018, where Sung-yi, alongside a couple of investors, opened the nightclub Burning Sun. A super high-end club with the richest celebrities, businessmen, and attractive women. No matter who you are, if you're currently in South Korea, you have to experience the Burning Sun at least once. And Sung-yi made sure that it was the thing to do in Korea. In the first couple of weeks, the club makes $1.4 million. Half of the population tries to experience this club at least once. And the wealthy guests spend generational wealth there. Burning Sun's menu consists of normal drinks, but also their extremely expensive alcohol packages and VIP tables. The most basic alcohol set starting at $10K all the way up to $100,000. And that was only the legal side of the business. The shady side most likely made a lot more, but I'll get to that very soon.
경찰이 오늘 버닝썬에 대한 압수수색을 시작으로 이번 압수수색 대상에는 강남경찰서 역삼지구대가 포함됐는데 버닝썬과 경찰과의 유착 의혹도 확인하기 위해서입니다.
Despite Burning Sun's reputation as this high-end establishment, it quickly gathered unsettling stories about it. Amy was one of the thousands of people who wanted to know what Burning Sun was like. All of her friends told her how great it was. And they were the biggest introverts, so there had to be some truth about it. A friend of a friend eventually approached Amy and said that she goes there quite regularly, and so they decide to go together. But the moment they step inside the club, Amy gets offered a very weird pill by the girl and is encouraged to take it. A pill that would later turn out to be one of the substances that turns you into a zombie. A state where you would just agree to everything you're told. And that friend would turn out to be a worker at the club.
물뽕이라는 마약은 굉장히 많이 사용이 됐어요. 보통 물뽕을 사용하는 테이블들이 보통 어디냐면 룸이 이제 깊숙이 들어가야 하는 룸이 하나 있었는데 왜냐하면 그 앞에 가드가 많았기 때문에 거기서는 솔직히 말해서 무슨 일을 하든 소리도 아마 안 들릴 거고.
And there are a couple of stories similar to that out there. But despite that, the general sentiment of the population and the police was, that's just what happens at the Burning Sun. It was a nightclub after all. And that worker might just be a very weird one. Who knows? Nobody really took it seriously.
버닝썬에서 물뽕을 먹고 이제 정신이 나간 여자애들 본 횟수는 거의 매일 봤죠.
November 24th. Kim goes to the Burning Sun with a couple of his friends, excited to see what the hype is all about. They get to partying and the atmosphere is great, but Kim is focused on something else. It's snowing outside. He decides to leave his friends for a while to go outside, but on his way out the club, his focus is redirected again. He sees a woman being dragged by a man. She's only half conscious and desperately tries to get the attention of the workers by smacking her hand on their laptop, but nobody cares.
제가 만났던 클럽 VIP 고객 중에 한 명은 특정하게 이제 어떤 VIP가 특정한 여성을 찍어서 저 여성을 나에게 데려오라라고 하면은 이제 그 여성을 어떻게든 작업해서 데리고 와서 의식이 없는 상태가 된 여성을 데리고 와서 호텔로 올라가거나 아예 차를 타고 다른 곳으로 모처로 이동하는 경우도 있었다고 합니다.
Kim is the only one who steps in and blocks the man's way. He tries to stop whatever in the hell is happening right now. It sure isn't right. That's all he knows. All of the workers now get up too, but instead of helping Kim, they beat him up. They drag him outside and punch him repeatedly in front of the club until he has 3 broken ribs and bruises everywhere. What Kim didn't know was that the man he tried to stop was a VIP special client. A big spender who has access to perks that nobody except the VIP clients and the workers know of. The woman he dragged, that was just one of his little perks that he paid for.
그런 동영상들이 워낙 많았고 그런 게 많았기 때문에 그때는 그게 그렇게 문제된다는 생각은 잘 안 했죠.
Despite the pain, Kim manages to call the police and explains what the employees of the club just did to him. Once they arrive, he shows the police the CCTV cameras that are outside and tells them that that would be all the evidence they needed to arrest the workers. And so the police go inside the club to review the footage. They talk to the employees and then go back outside. But again, they're not here to arrest the employees. They arrest Kim instead and drag him to the police station. And even the police beat him and trip him on the way there.
제가 취재를 했었던 많은 클럽의 관계자들은 경찰에게 현금을 주기도 했다라고 증언을 했거든요. 사건을 무마할 때, 그럴 때 뭐 그런 접촉을 했다라는 얘기를 많이 했습니다. 그래서
Kim is completely fed up with all of it. And so he decides to turn to social media with everything, trying to expose every detail he witnessed at Burning Sun. But he doesn't just talk about how they beat him and how the police are corrupt, but he talks about how he heard women screaming in private rooms. He goes on interview after interview and it goes viral. But there's one major problem. There's no concrete evidence and it turns into a he said she said situation. Burning Sun makes statements of their own, saying that Kim was actually the one who essayed women, which is why they beat him up outside. Some people think Kim is a bad guy and some believe him, and a lot of people are just confused. There's one major shift though. More and more women decide to step forward and tell their own horror stories.
바닥으로 내려와서 무릎 꿇고 빌었어요. 집에 보내달라고. 그 엄마가 너무 보고 싶다고 집에 보내달라고 계속 울면서 빌었어요.
Now that somebody else was fighting on the forefront, people might stop saying that that's just what happens at the Burning Sun. And then private videos start to spread. A video of an unconscious woman inside a private room in the club goes viral on platforms other than YouTube. And there's no denying that the club is in on it and knows about it. Since the employees talk about the situation, there's now no question about it. There's very shady and illegal things happening inside this club. But on February 22nd, 2019 is where hell breaks loose. Lee, the one who made a carbon copy of all the text messages, decides to go to a lawyer with the evidence. He is scared. He knows he should have submitted the evidence ages ago. But the police is corrupt and all of these celebrities have so much influence. But he also knows that he is the one who can put a definitive end to all of it.
카카오톡 이 단톡방을 처음 접하게 된 건 그 익명의 제보자가 그 파일이 담긴 USB들을 저희 사무실 그 우체통에 넣고 이제 갔거든요.
The lawyer reviews all of the footage, all of the chat logs. And together they go to the media with it. And on February 26, 2019, SBS Fun-E, a major television channel, reports on the messages.
당시 역삼지구대 경찰 2명이 출동했는데 이 버닝썬 클럽 안에 들어가지도 않고 문 앞에서 돌아갔습니다. 입구에 서 있던 보안 요원이 VIP 룸에는 손님이 없다는 말만 듣고 철수한 겁니다. 하지만 신고 사건 처리표엔 확인한 바라고 거짓으로 써놓기까지 했습니다.
Talks and videos of Gang SA, videos of unconscious women, and they're all joking about it. These messages perfectly explain the thought-out underground business that Burning Sun was built for from day one. Burning Sun had a very special menu for the VIPs that were regulars. The people who spent a lot of money didn't just get a separate entrance to the club, but were also added to a group chat. And similar to how menus change every week for certain drinks, the group chat would send messages of tonight's specials as well as the weekly offer. But instead of drinks, it was women. Unconscious women who have been SA'd with a price tag on them, and the VIPs could simply buy them for the night. If somebody else wanted your woman, you could simply bid on her, the highest bidder being able to SA that person again.
함께 술을 나눠 마셨다고 하더라고요. 그리고 여성들은 술자리가 얼마 되지 않아서 거의 일부분은 거의 기억을 다 잃을 정도로 다 까먹었대요.
All of the employees were in on it as well. Every time a special VIP came in, The so-called merchants did everything in their might to get them the girl they wanted, whether it was brunettes, ones with a lot of plastic surgery, or simply ones that were intoxicated enough. And these girls on the menu weren't workers, they were simply random club goers who just wanted to know what all the fuss was about. The very moment a woman stepped into the club, the employees would note them down and add them to the menu. If a VIP wanted them, the club's bartender would add substances to their drink to make them more agreeable and turn them into a zombie. The club also had a secret bathroom only for the special VIPs, where they could inject other illegal substances and essentially do whatever they wanted. They paid for it after all. This was their true business model. While people did everything to get into these clubs, the women unknowingly signed up to be put on a list for the highest bidder to SA. After all of these leaks hit the public, Burning Sun had no other choice but to stop operations. And it was just a matter of time until the idols were arrested too.
저는 오늘 오전에 저에 대한 엄중한 수사를 촉구드리는 탄원서를 경찰에 제출하였습니다. 하루빨리 이 모든 의혹들이 진상 규명될 수 있도록 성실하게 조사 임하겠습니다.
But it's safe to say a lot of them only got a slap on the wrist for it. Jang Jay-young was originally sentenced to 6 years for SA and illegal filming and distribution of content, but it was reduced to 5 years. He got out in 2023. Chae Chang-eun, member of FT Island, received 2.5 years. And Song-yi was guilty of selling people, embezzlement, overseas gambling, and more, and he got 1 year and 6 months after appeal. And he was essentially the mind behind everything.
국민 여러분과 드론에서 상처받고 피해받으신 모든 분들께 다시 한번 고개 숙여 사죄드립니다.
Sung-yi is already out and still has fans, and made headlines about cheating on multiple women in Bali already. There are also attempts of him getting back into the industry after all of this. The K-pop idol Go Hara also helped uncover some of the corrupt police officers who were involved, but most of them didn't even face any sort of punishment. Similar to this woman, she is the owner of Shinara Records, a company that had tons of music stores in South Korea back in the 80s and 90s. They were hugely popular because for some reason they were able to sell K-pop albums at such cheap prices. They were so cheap actually that they undercut every single other company that sold the exact same stuff. If you wanted to support your idol, going to Shinara Records was the go-to. Their super low cost had a dark and sinister secret behind it though. A secret that involves a cult, forced labor, SA, and the death of multiple people.
이 목사로부터 대중을 현혹시키는 수법을 터득한 김 씨는 서울 상계동과 경기도 일대에서 신도 300여 명을 끌어모아 지난 82년
The name of this woman is Kim Ki-sun. She grew up in a modest and religious family. They didn't have a lot of money or any influence, which is why very early on, Kim always had the desire to become somebody people loved or feared. In her early years, she joined a church known as the Shaving Church. It was led by Pastor Lee Kyo-bu. It got its name because people joining were forced to shave their heads, as well as take off their clothes and hug and dance around the church. The followers believed that doing so would mean they would eventually all go to heaven together. It was a controversial religion, but there was nothing illegal about it, until Pastor Lee eventually went to jail for public nudity and being violent towards another pastor, which made the church disband. All of the members had no direction now, and Kim took this opportunity to create her own religion. She tells all of the members that the pastor's spirit has moved into her own body, and she calls herself Baby. From this very moment on, Kim would only refer to herself as a 3-year-old baby, or in Korean, Aga, and she calls her religion the Baby Garden. And the members of the once Shaving Church believe her. They start worshipping Aga, the baby reincarnation of Jesus. She tells them that the baby cannot sin, and since she was one, everything she did was perfect, and if she did make a mistake, it was an honest one. Kim quickly made a lot of plans. She wanted to build a self-sufficient farm where she could live with all of the members in unity. But she didn't have the funds to do so. She was just a housewife. And so she tells her followers, give me all of your belongings, all of your family's assets, everything, and give it to the baby. The worshippers listen. Some sell their family house for $500,000 and give it all to their new god. With her sudden influx of capital, Kim buys a massive plot of land and also calls it the baby garden. It is now their very own heaven. Her followers would be able to live with God herself. All of them moved in, and instead of paying somebody to build houses with her wealth, she commands her followers to build them for her. And they also built farms and factories, just to get the love of Aga. For Kim, it was truly heaven. She was suddenly able to buy anything she wanted, and literally had 400 devoted people who would kill for her. But for them, it was actually hell on earth. Her followers suddenly have to work 18-hour days. The adults work on the field or sell rice cakes in the streets, while the kids sell fish rolls in the subway stations. It is gruesome and tiring work for no pay. Most of the time, the fish rolls that were sold didn't even look good or fresh, but the kids looked so exhausted that the adults just bought them out of pity. Kim is now extremely rich, but she wants more. So she creates Shinara Records, the music distribution company that quickly dominates the entire market because of their cheap prices. And you might be able to guess why their prices were so cheap. Allegedly, a majority of the workers for Shinara used to work for completely free because they all worshipped Aga. Among the baby garden factories were also tape factories, which was the first thing they actually sold in their stores. While customers thought they were simply supporting their artists by buying albums, they were secretly funding a cult. Shinara Records was able to get long-term contracts with agencies working for various K-pop groups, and they became a staple in the industry. At one point, they held 30% of the market share in South Korea without anybody knowing what actually happened behind the scenes. Now, if you take a look at the followers of Baby Garden, there were all sorts of people, individuals, but also whole families that all moved in with her. But Kim didn't like a very specific thing about her followers. She didn't like the family dynamics. She didn't like the concept of a mother or a father or a husband or a wife. So she established 3 rules that had to be followed within the baby garden. First rule: cut all ties to compassion and earthly connections. You are forbidden from calling each other mother, father, or siblings. Instead, you can only call them using their government names or by sir or ma'am. Everybody is equal under baby after all. Second rule: cut all ties with material goods. The pursuit of worldly pleasures is dishonorable. You should just donate all of your assets to the leader. You're basically already in heaven after all. You are with the baby. And the third rule: cut all ties with personal desires. Any form of romantic relationship between men and women is strictly prohibited. Men and women are segregated. There are only rooms with either women or men. And you should only have feelings towards Aga. And Kim definitely made use of that last rule. Every night, Kim would call multiple young men into her room. She would wait for them there and then show love towards them. And after she was done, she would call in the next one until she was satisfied. Baby was love after all. This was not love at all. These were young and naive men who were manipulated into not just working for her for 16 hours for free, but also doing anything she wanted besides that. And there was actually one unspoken rule: do not disobey. Even though this religion is all about love, if anybody catches you breaking the rules, if you build a relationship with the opposite sex or don't work properly, the others will beat you. They will beat you until you're free from your sins. Or sadly, these hellish conditions cost the lives of multiple people, and I will talk about one in detail. This is 5-year-old Nagwon. He moved into baby garden with his parents, obviously not willingly. And once in there, he was more than confused. Suddenly, he can't call his own mother, mother. And he isn't even allowed to show any affection towards her. Every time he does anything that counts as breaking the rules, like hugging his own mother, he gets punished physically by Aga, or rather Kim. this child would get punished by a middle-aged woman who called herself a baby. Every time Nagwan saw Kim, he would start crying out of fear. One day he missed his mother a lot, but he wasn't allowed to see her since she was working, and that made him frustrated, so he pooped and smeared it on the window. When Nagwan's mom finds out, she goes to tell Kim what happened and just says that he misses his mother and doesn't know how to express his feelings. But Kim doesn't care. She simply says to the group, "This child is possessed by an evil spirit. It is trying to harm me." And so Nagwan gets taken into the pig barn on the farm and he's tied up against a pole. His own aunt is there with Kim and a couple of others. And Kim tells her, "This child is possessed by a demon. You need to exorcise him. He should try the feces of the pigs." That is what Kim says. And Nagwan's aunt just agrees. She follows Kim's orders and feeds him. Every time Nagwan would resist, the group would then take out sticks, embed it with nails, and discipline him until Nagwan stops resisting. After all of that, Nagwan's aunt and the group just leave him there. Now, despite his terrible condition, Nagwan actually manages to escape from his ropes and runs to the dining room of the farm to look for any sort of food. He was starving, literally. He only got water from somebody else who was also tied up with him, and so he runs all the way across the farm just for a chance to get some food. But Kim simply returns him to the pig pen, ties him up again, and then the punishments start until he passes away. This cult would flourish for decades. Kids were literally born into this baby garden and grew up to be adults, not attending school or even going outside except if it was for the 16-hour work shift. Kim's followers only had 4 holidays, meaning they only had 4 days in the year where they could take a break. And even during these holidays, all they would do is hold a big parade for Aga. Until a man walks into a police station. He's here to report the murder of his 4-year-old son. Prosecutor Kang gets a report of Nagwan's death, but 10 years later. "I am a father who deserves to die 1,000 deaths. My son has been murdered," is all he says. Nagwan's dad was in the baby garden for another decade before realizing what had truly happened to his family. Prosecutor Kang is skeptical at first. I mean, Baby Garden literally runs Shinara Records, one of the biggest companies in the K-pop industry. And they have this huge farm with a lot of people, sure, but they're just a small community, nothing else. There's no way they're actually a cult-like religion doing these despicable crimes. But just on the off chance that this was true, on the off chance that Baby Garden was indeed a cult, would mean that this would be Prosecutor Kang's biggest case ever. He accepts. Right off the bat, there were 2 main problems for Prosecutor Kang. Firstly, his superior refused to help him. They simply didn't have the manpower in this district. He has the police as a team, but he's pretty much on his own when it comes to putting together a trial. And secondly, he was going against one of the most wealthy cult-like entities out there. They had millions of dollars at their disposal, and especially Kim has influence in all sorts of ways. But Kang just decides to go full force, and he plans something big. Kim is holding a lecture for her worshippers about how she is love, how they should love Baby, and how Baby is the only truth. When suddenly, the premises get raided by the police. 50 officers and detectives run into the place. The people are panicking, and the only thing you can hear is, "You are surrounded. Surrender." Everybody is running, and some even are fighting back, attacking the officers. But after all of this chaos settles, they realize one thing: the most important person is missing, the baby. Kim managed to escape, which is absolutely tragic. She wasn't a stupid woman. She had the funds, influence, and the manpower to vanish from this earth without a trace. The raid was a bust. When the officers go through the baby garden, they find safes filled with stacks of cash and guns, as well as luxury goods only for Aga. She has a steam room and a luxurious bed, while her followers live in poverty. But all of this doesn't matter when the main target of the operation is gone. Almost none of the cult members, after having the opportunity to leave and speak up, want to rat her out. They just simply start working again like nothing happened. 16-hour days. Kang is sure that he just threw away one of the biggest opportunities of his life. until Kim appears again. She turns herself in. Her lawyer told her that she will only be held for 3 days and then she would be a free woman. During the interrogations, Kim is completely stoic. She denies all of the murder charges and stays calm and collected. But the detectives have one trick up their sleeve: Nagwan's mom. During the investigation, Nagwan's mom was ready to testify that her son was tortured and eventually passed away due to Kim. This was their ace, that they could also support with a couple of cases that came in from members who were able to leave. The police digs up the entire place for any kind of evidence that a murder actually happened, but they can't find anything, just a lot of pigs. So the entire case truly depends on the witnesses. However, one by one, all of them fold. The witnesses retract their statements in front of the court, saying none of this truly happened. Kim obviously still had influence over them, whether it was with money, threats, or something else. But they're still Nagwan's mom, right? Their only hope to get her convicted as a murderer. She stands up and says, "My son died from a heart condition. He was never tortured." Nagwan's father is furious. The only way this woman could be behind bars for a long time would be for his wife to tell the truth. But she was still influenced by Kim's will. She denied the dark reality about her own son to please the baby. The case was over. She was innocent in the eyes of the law. But despite that, Kang actually manages to prove tax evasion, embezzlement, and assault, which sadly only resulted in 4 years and a fine of $8.9 million, which might sound like a lot, but she paid that in cash. Now you might think after all of this came out, Baby Garden and her entire empire would crumble, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Kim is now 84 years old, and although she's suffering from dementia, Shinara Records is still a pretty big company that proceeds to have long-term contracts with multiple K-pop agencies, and the current CEO is allegedly one of the Baby Garden's closest followers, while quite a lot of people actually still work in the farm. Huge companies like those being exposed for heinous crimes are not an uncommon thing in Korean entertainment history, and Jang Jay-young's notes that were released to the public before she died shows exactly that.
하지만 이 문서를 쓴 고인은 더 이상 이 세상에 없습니다.
Jang Jay-young was born on January 25th, 1980, and from a very early age she had this big dream of becoming an actress, which was a difficult thing to do since she had no sort of support system due to her parents passing away and her being only with her siblings. She managed to make her debut as an actress in 2006, however, with a television commercial, and 3 years later would be the time she would hit her first big role. She played a character in the very popular Korean drama Boys Over Flowers. Jang played the role of Sunny, one of the antagonists or mean girls. It wasn't a lead role, but it put her on the map. And this could have been the beginning of a great future. But for Jang Jay-young, it was the beginning of the end. And that is because she has a very tough time with the management agency she's signed to. The company is called The Contents Entertainment, and it's run by Kim Sang-hoon. They're supposed to help her find her auditions and provide the financial support for training and managers. Basically a bet on her that she would make it big and they would see a return on their investment. But this kind of arrangement comes with one major problem. The company has a lot of influence over her. I mean, if they dropped her, she would be left with basically nothing. So she has to obey whatever order they gave her if she wanted to see success in the industry. It was the only way. And the orders she got from her CEO are way darker than you might think. It's March 7th, 2009, and Jang just finished a call with her older sister. She talked about her stress and how she wanted to become an actress so badly, but it was simply too much of a burden. Everybody knew that Jang was under a lot of pressure, but one thing that she said made her sister worry a lot. She said, "I just want to die." And a couple of hours later, Jang's brother actually tries to call her, but she doesn't pick up. So Jang's sister decides to check up on her at 7:42 p.m. But the moment she steps into the house, she realizes that what Jang said was truly what she meant. She finds her and she's dead. It was self-inflicted. She did, however, leave something behind for the world to read. A 7-page document that exposed CEOs, businessmen, directors, and all sorts of powerful people in Korea. Please avenge me. The man who came to ask to be served is the devil. I was forced to serve more than 100 times. Whenever I get new clothes, I have to serve a new demon. Not only in Gangnam, but I also served at Karaoke Suwon and various other places. Even on the anniversary of my parents' death, I was forced to serve. Since I have already made a list of his names, I will take revenge to the death. Even if I die, I will take my revenge from the grave. That was one of the paragraphs in the note translated. Now this serve term essentially meant that she had to entertain these men, and it wasn't entertaining in a normal networking kind of way, but she was forced to do certain things against her will, if you actually get what I'm referring to. And it did take a huge toll on her. And this document was extremely detailed, and she recounted multiple incidents with dates and locations and details. And if she didn't serve these favors, she would lose all of the financial support from her agency and sponsors. And she didn't just name names in the documents. In multiple of these cases, she mentions that her CEO Kim would physically assault and throw bottles at her, and he would grab her by her hair and treat her like a pile of dirt essentially. I'm a powerless rookie actress. I want to be freed from this pain. Now the thing is, she couldn't just leave this company either, even if she wanted to throw away her career. She was actually bound by a legal contract, a contract that made her a product of this agency, not just an employee. One of the contract clauses that she signed to was basically that she had to do anything the company ordered relating to the entertainment side of the business, and if she didn't follow the orders, she would have to pay $100,000 in fines. And that is not even considering the blacklist threat. If the CEO wanted, he could simply ensure that she would never able to work in industry again. And all of these notes are leaked to the public by her manager. And he actually says that she was planning to sue Kim, the CEO. I mean, he was known for being controlling and abusive, and that document would have been the key to bringing all of these men down. Now, the moment this message hits the media, Jang becomes one of the most talked about actresses at the moment. And what happened next is controversial to say the least. The 31 men she mentioned are obviously interrogated by the police, and most of them say that their encounter was strictly friendly and nothing illegal ever happened. But these are all very powerful people with a lot of influence, and the public thought that something fishy might be going on, since one of the interrogations, for example, only lasted 35 minutes. It seemed like most of the people were getting very good treatments by the police. But there was obviously one big problem. There was no concrete evidence. It was essentially her letters versus their statements of the situation. The letters could also be made up or fake, which will actually be important in just a second. So nobody was convicted of a crime, except for the CEO. And that would be it, case closed. For almost 10 years, nothing else would happen, until a new person came forward. And this is where things get really messy. Another actress from Jang Jay-young's agency, Yoon Ji-oh, testifies. Yoon was a trainee when Jang was employed with the company, and she was there for about 7 months. Now initially, Yoon told the police that she didn't know of any wrongdoings of the CEO or knew of the fact that Jang had all these meetings that turned inappropriate. But now she says that she saw the entire list of men during these meetings, and she actually goes on interviews and says that she also went to these night meetings with Jang a couple of times. And she asked the public to help her with the case, to reveal the entire truth, to get these men behind bars. Thousands of people in the public support her, since she is essentially this underdog who's willing to go against the Korean entertainment industry, and the people start donating money. According to her, she's being threatened by these powerful men and needs protection. Her life is in danger. But as time goes on, her credibility actually starts to crack. Her stories become increasingly more dramatic as she goes on more interviews, and her stories start to change. And people who actually knew both of them claimed that they weren't even that close. They were simply acquaintances. Now to top this off, Yoon even wrote a book about her called The 13th Testimony. Now there's no denying that both of them knew each other, but if they were truly just acquaintances and Jang never opened up about her problems to her, it would mean that Yoon was simply there to claim the fame of a dead person. And it turned out that was indeed the case. The co-author of the book eventually comes forward and files a lawsuit against Yoon, saying that all of her stories and testimonies were actually just straight lies. And Jang's former boyfriend also came forward and said that he never heard Jang mention her name once. He couldn't believe that somebody he never heard of would write a book about her. And once all of that came out, the public turned on her, and people actually started filing lawsuits against her because they donated money thinking that Yoon was actually close to Jang, but she simply lied to the public and the investigators. And because of that, Yoon actually went to Canada, and there are 3 arrest warrants on her since October 2019. To this day, she claims that she said the truth, and people are simply trying to silence her. But that isn't even the end of the story. Years later, again, new evidence came out. When forensic experts re-examined Jang's document, they found something nobody expected. All of the pages that she left to the world weren't even written by her. The handwriting wasn't consistent. Parts of it had been forged by her former manager, the very person who leaked the paper to the media in the beginning. The manager actually wanted to make his own entertainment company and stole the actresses from his former CEO. And then, never before footage is released. The last images of Jang Jay-young before her death, February 28th. 2009. You can see Jang with her manager multiple times a week, where she gives him a document envelope and a diary. The manager told Jang that he can help her get released from this contract she was in if she simply writes an anonymous testimony of all the things that happened to actually sue the CEO. And so Jang did exactly that. Her letter wasn't a goodbye letter, but a confession to try to get herself out of her desperate situation. And the confession letter actually never should have hit the public in the first place. The manager had promised the family of Jang to not release the letters, so she could go in peace. And he actually burned them in front of their eyes, but made copies of them and then simply released them either way to better his image and sue the CEO. The case is a complete mess. Because of that evidence, nobody knows what actually happened, and we might never know the full truth. But the manager was arrested because of the blackmail to the CEO, while all the other 31 men got away with it. VR Chat is a video game that you can play with a VR headset, and even online, there are a ton of disturbing people. In early 2024, a user by the name of Cosmo is seen hanging around in a VR chat world called Furry Talk and Chill, a place where people gather and interact over their shared interests in human-like animal avatars. Everything seems fine until a user known as an extremely racist and twisted individual shows up and drags Cosmo into a rabbit hole far more disturbing than anyone could ever imagine.
The white race is the only race capable of generating children that can learn everything fast enough to actually generate and create heaven.
Kitsune Cell, also known as Richard, is a 34-year-old man said to be living in Washington. At first glance, Cell already doesn't really fit in within the likes of an ordinary person at all. He's a self-proclaimed furry who also likes to act like the smartest person that's ever existed.
When I was in elementary school, I studied every single science: math, programming, medicine, engineering, and electrical engineering. And I figured out that the afterlife is physically measurable, derivable using science, and the only physical way to make it good is for everyone to become as intelligent as I am specifically.
And he also has 2 Twitter accounts, one of which he uses to post explicit images of human-like animal characters. But while things already look off on the surface, many of his victims would later realize that Cell is someone everyone should have stayed away from. Although Cell seems like a strange but harmless person, it doesn't take long before Cosmo starts to see his true colors. At first, the conversation feels normal. There's just a normal back and forth. But over time, Cell actually starts saying more and more disturbing things. Cosmo doesn't catch on at first, but eventually it becomes clear that the friendly act was all just a facade.
Your hole is exactly length from your sigmoid. You want from you? Okay. Also, everyone wants that. Even me, who was extremely against that act. Because it seemed to me like it was stupid that men couldn't just not be gay. Ah, so you would. I would. But you know I'm 16, right? That makes you less rotten. You're supposed to be single at 14.
This is just one of their conversations, and Cell would also randomly send Discord messages to Cosmo from his main account, making it obvious how openly racist he is.
Feeling like murder. And Mexicans and Russians and have been annoying me all day. They're trying to make worse, as they always do. No reason for any of them to live.
At some point, Cell actually tells Cosmo that he's 24. Cosmo, who's only 16 at the time, believes him, and sometime after, Cell decides to send a photo of himself with absolutely nothing on him at all. And Cosmo wouldn't be the only victim.
I just stood up and looked at myself in the mirror and didn't move. I just didn't move an inch, and he just basically just me, and that was it.
Soon after, Cell would also talk to Fluffy, and they would actually develop a relationship that was way deeper. The two were actually dating.
So are you. Anyways, good night, master. Good night, my love. See you tomorrow. Love you. Yes, I'll see you later, babe. Kisses. I love you. I love you too. Sorry for not responding this late. I was watching YouTube. Hug emoji. Hey, how are you? Annoyed. Pain. Disgusted by the existence of even one guy.
Fluffy only decided to reveal his messages to the public on his birthday, which means every single one of them was sent when he was still a year younger. And creepily enough, this isn't the worst part of what Cell had been saying to Fluffy at the time. When asked about how young of a person Cell would go for, this is his response.
How young would you go if I'm allowed to ask though? I need the youngest available. They need to be attached to our group as closely as physically possible. Would even 7 be okay? Yes.
And even after that, Cell just keeps going, forcing his twisted ideas onto anyone he talks to. And in one conversation that Fluffy points out, which I'm not gonna fully show, Cell says one of the most messed up things a human could ever say.
The only physical way to impress a female is to rape her. No female would ever agree to birth a child.
But that's not all that he's capable of doing. He would later be seen having a minor believed to be years old in his VR world. The same world where he's seen caressing other people as well, who are most likely not of age.
Hi, friend.
Hey, Giggler.
Oh, dude, this one's like 8 years old. Nah, no way.
Among the people Cell targeted, one in particular stands out though. Someone we'll call Mittens. He claims that Cell exploited him for over a year and even shares what Cell looked like back when he was younger compared to how he looks now at 34. In FFI's video, he even talks about the time he caught Cell doing unspeakable things to a boy on VR chat.
He was cuddling with this 13-year-old boy and like licking his face and doing with him, and I was just there watching, and it was horrible. And eventually the boy left and he was like, it takes a long time to get these monkeys to listen to you, and get the on the floor and let me them.
And when Cell gets into a conversation about what age is the right age to safely reproduce, he says this without hesitation.
So the younger they are, the better the quality?
Yeah, pretty much.
Fortunately, his VR chat account will later get banned in late August of 2024. But even with all of these warnings life throws at him, the first thing he does right after is just make another account, which is called DevX, the same name he used on Discord in those earlier conversations. However, on September 12, 2024, someone named Ben, who's years old, also comes forward and talks about meeting Cell in July through an unknown account called Megathon. And it's actually confirmed to be Cell's account after he tells Ben to add him on his DevX account. And the conversation, like almost every other one, would end up escalating to a point where Cell would ask Ben for pictures of himself. And they would also do unspeakable things on VR chat.
He has touched me inappropriately, well, in VR obviously, and has tried to do, he has done the with me.
Months actually passed by after all of this, and there aren't any news about Cell since, until this happens. On June 1st, 2025, a clip of Cell talking to VR chat users gets posted on YouTube, where he now goes by his new account name, Cell Fox, and he says this.
Me, 6-year-olds, their religion, their actual religion in the United States is having sex with 6-year-olds. So younger than 6 is advised.
Now there are rumors about the police being alerted about him, considering that his identity is documented on the internet to such a detail, but actually arresting him will probably be a difficult task to do, which wasn't the case for our next VR chat user. He's in prison.
A 15-year-old girl in Florida. What? He met her online 2 years ago and met her for... He's 36.
It's September 27, 2020, 4 p.m. The police arrive at a quiet house in Hernando County. They step inside and head toward the bedroom of the 13-year-old girl living there with her parents. Once inside, they open the closet door and they find a man hiding inside. 36-year-old Jonathan Rosmoyne, a Louisiana man with a dark secret. But how did this even happen? It all began in VR chat 2 years prior. Jonathan, 34-year-old back then, was spending time in one of the VR chat worlds when he meets a girl. For our sake, we're gonna call her Emily. At first, everything was harmless. Just two people talking in a virtual world. Emily at first told him though that she was 18 and Jonathan didn't question it. But what began as a casual conversation slowly became something more. They started talking more often, opening up, and before long they had this emotional connection going on. And over time, this connection deepened until it turned into a full-on romantic relationship. Emily started calling Jonathan her boyfriend. Eventually though, this VR chat digital relationship wasn't enough for them. They wanted more, and so they made plans to take it to the next level, which was to meet in person. But somewhere along the way, the truth came out. Emily admitted that she wasn't 18, but 3 years younger. And despite that fact, their relationship didn't stop. Jonathan simply didn't care. He continued on, and Emily continued calling him her boyfriend. August 19th, 2020 was the day they actually met up in person. He traveled to an entirely different state just to meet her. And once inside her house, they decided he would start living in her bedroom storage area on and off for the next month.
This guy drove from Louisiana to Spring Hill, Florida, met her. They hooked up on several occasions since they first communicated.
Whenever her parents were home, he'd squeeze into her closet, keeping quiet and staying out of sight. But the moment they left for work, things changed. When the house was empty, that's when he would come out and they would be alone. By then, they weren't just holding hands and watching movies. He was her quote-unquote boyfriend after all, and you can imagine what they did. It came to a point that they even developed a sneaky system. The plan was to keep her door locked, and she would pretend that she was still changing and use that moment to let him slip back into hiding whenever her parents were home. And at other times, he simply stayed in a van parked outside the family's home. And this would go on for more than a month. On September 27th, everything came crashing down though. The girl's parents hear a very suspicious noise coming from her bedroom, and when they walk in to investigate, they find Jonathan, a grown man, hiding in their child's room. Stunned and horrified, the parents obviously pick up the phone and call the police, and officers arrest him on the spot. He's hit with multiple serious charges: 4 counts of lewd and inappropriate behavior with a minor, obscene communication, and using a computer to lure and travel to meet a child. In the end, Jonathan remains in the Hernando County Jail, held on a $25,000 bond. And once Jonathan's court case actually came to an end, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the consequences don't even end there. He'll also be required to serve 10 years of probation upon release and register as an individual with a record of that kind of thing, which is a similar thing our next person had an arrest warrant for.
They go on to request NSFW photos from the minor, asking for a skirt picture, and then for them to pull the skirt up, all while knowing they are 16 and he is 23.
Back in 2015, a person called Eric started working at Kmart, a store chain in the United States. Having the role of the electronics department manager, he actually quickly grew attached to the place. He just loved the overall vibe and layout of the store. Now, Eric's love for his workplace grew to such an extent that he actually started recreating it in 3D using the software SketchUp. It was his own little personal project that he made just because he was passionate about it. In 2018, however, the Kmart that Eric worked at closed down, as did most of the remaining Kmart stores. But by that time, Eric managed to create a simple, low polygon render of his Kmart. It didn't have any merchandise or detail yet, but Eric just kept going at it. And a year later, by October 21st, 2019, this early version of the Kmart evolved into an actual world that was used in VR chat, the game he became addicted to back in 2017. And he went by the name Eric Cerno.
Hi there, and welcome to VR Chat Kmart. I'm Eric, the store manager and creator of this place. What What you are standing in is a one-to-one recreation of the real-world Kmart store I used to work at. My goal with this world is to preserve the many memories people had shopping at Kmart in real life, and bring new memories to those who have their first experience of Kmart here in VRChat.
The VRChat Kmart, that was internally still called the main store, had its soft opening as a so-called sleepover map. People were able to join and just hang out. And because the map was based on the store Eric worked at, which was initially built in 1992, the VR world also featured retro elements, like the in-store restaurant, the garden shop, and even an auto service center. It even played the era-appropriate music. And the store was a success, which is why a couple of months later, on December 19th, Eric launched the now called VRChat Kmart Express, a smaller but compatible version for both PC and Oculus Quest players. It was only a third of the size of the main store, but it had all the cozy details that reminded players of the actual Kmart. And this world was an even bigger success. So much so that Eric actually managed to build a team of people working on this Kmart world.
Why are you letting this guy impersonate being an employee? You remember hiring this guy?
Works here. Shut your goddamn
This guy does not work here,
work
bro.
here. Get the
Ain't no way you would hire someone who looks like that.
He was building a name for himself, and 2021 was the year where the final full-fledged version of this Kmart world dropped. It was called the Super VRChat Kmart Center and had the most detailed features so far. By this time, Eric transformed what began as really just a side project into one of the biggest worlds in VRChat at the time. At its peak, it had over 3,000 dedicated members, which was basically a quarter of the game's active player base back then. And this Kmart world would thrive for years to go on, and people would really enjoy the community feeling it had, as well as the overall experience.
Why are you at self-checkout? Is there even self-checkout in the Kmart? Apparently.
However, behind the scenes, Eric used his power as the owner to take advantage of his team members. Over on Discord, Eric befriended somebody who worked in the virtual Kmart store and played in it quite often. We're just gonna give her the name Alice. Alice wasn't of age, which can be seen by the way she introduced herself to the Kmart Discord server. But despite that fact, Eric would decide to talk to Alice more and more. And unfortunately, it would end up getting to a point where Eric would feel comfortable enough to initiate more explicit messages, also including photos. Now, Alice never reacted to these disturbing messages, and she never actually initiated any of these behaviors. But Eric would just keep going, and to be honest, these messages are pretty gruesome, and he would also demand pictures of her. Now, the fact that he was talking to her was known by a couple of people in the community, which is why in January of 2024, somebody would decide to step in and confront Eric. His ex-girlfriend messaged him, giving him the chance to talk about the allegations. But when she messaged him, he just simply implied that she was unnecessarily stirring up drama and denied all of these facts. And this would go unnoticed by the community and the police until May 2024, when everything changed. Lego Man, a very well-respected figure in VRChat and the owner of another very popular VRChat world called Uganda, decided to make a tweet where he said that he and the server would officially distance themselves from Eric. He would tell the world that Eric had actually an arrest warrant for him and allegedly fled the state of Pennsylvania to avoid the arrest, while all of his electronic devices were seized from his home following a raid. But what was this arrest warrant actually for? Well, the arrest warrant was issued for the possession of material including people not of age. So combining this with the chat logs that we just talked about, it seems like Eric wasn't the innocent guy he seemed to be. Despite him initially denying all of this, on May 22nd, his fingerprints would be taken and his bail would be set at $55,000. And he would be officially charged with 4 things: owning illicit material, sending illicit material, abuse, and the corruption of people that are not legal. The actual trial is still pending though, so Eric is obviously innocent until proven guilty. The next man did a similar thing, but he actually fully abducted his victim.
Hunter Fox needs to turn over the kid. This guy is a predator and also a member of the hobby community.
It's late November 2022 in Layton, Utah, where the McCarneys live with their normal teen son called Evan. Evan is just an average guy. Plenty of friends, plays golf, and spends hours online like most kids in his age. He specifically is often on VR chat, Discord, Roblox, and even Twitter. At first, Evan's parents notice Evan spending more and more time on online games. He's always on his computer, even isolating himself from all the other people around him. But his mom, Heather, doesn't think much of it. She just figures that it's a normal part of growing up. However, what she doesn't know is that something or someone very disturbing is starting to creep around their son.
Andrea Adams spoke with the mother, and she was saying how her son was talking to this guy through video game and Oculus.
Tadashi Kura Kojima, also known as Aaron Michael Zeman, is a 26-year-old man from Tucson, Arizona. He isn't what people call a normal guy. He is a furry, and not just that, but he also posts a ton of explicit images of himself online, sometimes dressed as a furry. Terrifyingly, Aaron also hangs around Discord, Roblox, and of course VR chat. And this is exactly where he meets Evan. Aaron and Evan begin to talk and play together, and they eventually even begin to interact on other platforms like Twitter. They build a connection, you could even say a romantic one, where they eventually decide to go further and communicate on more under-the-radar messaging platforms, including Telegram, where the conversations turn even more personal.
I want to be able to make your life better by giving you something that will make you smile.
Their relationship starts to develop more and more as the days pass, no matter what happens, which could be considered the first red flag. Things are going smoothly for Aaron. He builds a connection to Evan, who's obviously not old enough to make wise decisions. That is until a certain someone starts to discover what's really happening behind her son's excessive use of his computer. On the night of November 20th, 2022, Heather, who's the mom, is getting ready for bed at home when she suddenly finds out that Evan is still using his phone well past the family's agreed lights out time at 8:30 p.m. And so she quickly comes inside the room to retrieve the phone. And this is when she suddenly hears him talking to somebody. And after taking the phone away from Evan, she hurriedly brings it to her room. "Who is texting him?" she says. And when Heather finally opens the phone, she starts getting deeply disturbed by what she found. In one text message, Heather sees that Aaron excitedly told their son that he got a new job in Utah and would be moving there very soon. And he also asked Evan for his actual location to their house and also the nearby school bus stop, all of which Evan sent over. And after finding out the back and forth messages between the two, they decide to ground Evan and take all of his electronic devices away. However, just 9 days later, they discovered that Evan used a different phone in the house to actually continue talking to Aaron. And at this point, Heather finds out that these messages were turning explicit, with Aaron sending Evan explicit videos, and Evan actually replying back with explicit pictures of himself. Evan's parents are sick to their stomach, and they actually decide to contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And they also decide to file a police report pulling away their teenage children out of school for a week. They're afraid that something actually might happen to Evan. And just 3 days later, the local police finally petition a state judge for a search warrant to be served to Twitter to get evidence of Evan's exploitation in the platform's records. The search warrant states that the platform has to provide all available information about the account they believe belongs to the suspect. What they don't know, however, is that they're making a huge mistake. They find out that the account name they requested never existed on the platform. Aaron's Twitter account was called Hunter Floofy Fox, but the warrant actually requested records from Hunter Fluffy Fox. And this mistake would cause 20 days of delays, which was enough time for Evan and Aaron to talk publicly on Twitter. And this time, Evan actually decided to use his family's VR headset to talk to it. On December 13th, Aaron posted a tweet saying,
"Oh my god, I love that man."
Who's not a man at the time, by the way, but a child.
"Oh my god, I love that man. I'm going to spend my life with him. I'm so lucky. We played VR chat together for about an hour today. I heard his voice for the first time since 20th November 2022. This is already the best Christmas. I love you."
Evan then replies to the tweet saying,
"He's talking about me,"
in a seemingly enthusiastic tone. And seeing Evan's response, Aaron replies,
"You, only you, always you, my lamb. I'm yours, all yours, only yours." as long as you'll have me.
And their messages become more intimate with each passing day. And Evan's parents actually remain unaware that this is still happening.
We see a lot of these cases, unfortunately, where there's this type of communication going on. Rarely does it escalate.
On December 16th, Aaron posted a tweet out of nowhere saying,
"All supplied up now. Hella up to see my man. Oop, I guess I'm a fox after all. Nah, I'm in love. I'll march beside you with my pride, my lamb. I love you with all my heart and soul. You loving you'll be in my arms soon, my love."
And the next day, Aaron tweets again,
"Damn it all, he's just the sweetest man in existence. I am too unbelievably blessed. I love him so hecking much. You hear that? I love you, Lammy."
And another 2 days later, Aaron posts another tweet.
"My lamb and I are getting married on the trail. Wee hee hee, I love you, my lamb."
Several days pass after that, and on a seemingly normal night, Ken, the father, decides to go downstairs to check on his sons after going to sleep. But his biggest fear actually comes true. "This is not right," he says, after opening the door of Evan's room and finding his blinds up and his windows open. Ken quickly climbs out of the window, desperately searching their yard for Evan, but he doesn't find him, and his passport and piggy bank are also missing. They decide to call the police, telling them that Evan's gone. In a span of 45 minutes, the police arrive, and the family and the police go around the neighborhood searching for any sign of Evan. Heather, the mother, on the other hand, goes to look at the security camera footage of their house. The system was wiped clean. Evan was probably behind that as well, so she goes door to door to ask if neighbors could check their security camera footage as well, but that is to no avail. Eventually, the police decide to issue an Amber Alert, saying that a young boy has gone missing, and Heather actually receives thousands of messages from people online, helping the family as well as the police find the Twitter accounts of the two. And it isn't until the next day that a report comes through. Someone calls in a suspicious vehicle at a gas station in Grand Island, Nebraska, nearly 800 miles from Salt Lake City, and the police actually start investigating the suspicious vehicle. And lucky for them, Evan is actually in there, safe and alive, and they immediately arrest Aaron.
Alert gas station attendant had actually thought something looked suspicious about the car and these people that were there at the gas station, called the police department, and they responded, looked into it, separated the two of them, and identified our victim in this case as being somebody who we had listed as kidnapped and missing.
The McConaughey family is finally back together, while Aaron's life ends up being changed forever. He loses everything: his cell phone, gaming devices, and his car. And at the trial, the judge gives him 15 years in prison and a lifetime of supervised release. This next person, though, is an active VR content creator with a disturbing past.
The things that I have done should have never happened. I ask forgiveness for God to say I have wrongs and I need to be better.
Sonic OO started his YouTube channel back in 2016, and he would actually start streaming quite consistently in 2019, just 3 years later, with his initial username being Sonic the 5th. In his streams, he would begin with a variety of games, ranging from Minecraft, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Sonic of course. But one game would be the most dominant one on his channel: VR chat.
Give me this! Give me it!
And although it started off as a quite wholesome moment of a person just streaming and playing games, things quickly turned dark. But over the years, Sonic would start becoming more aggressive with the thumbnails and basically post borderline NSFW on there, with titles like VR Chat and an End Challenge. And a lot of his streams would now contain him designing avatars for VR Chat. And this is the very moment he would go way too far. To give you some context, Amanda the Adventurer is a game that went viral in 2023, with Amanda who's basically the main antagonist the game is built around. Now, Amanda looks like a child, around 2 years old, but Sonic in one of his streams decided to make a version of her in VR chat that most definitely wasn't of appropriate nature, if I can put it like that. And this of course sparked major controversy within the community and the people who knew of this, which quickly prompted him to make an apology video.
Man's not really a kid, it's a demon, but it looks like one, so like people think that, and honestly, that's not really justified at all. It's weird. Okay. That worked just fine. It's weird. Okay.
His first apology though was essentially saying that the character was a demon and just looked like a person who is, you know, not of age, since Amanda in the game can basically transform. But of course that wasn't really a good excuse. And the YouTuber Mro or Meow made a video about this exact situation, and Sonic Owa actually watched it and responded. But he simply defended himself by blaming his mental health, his worldview at the time, and even claimed he was going through a Satanist arc.
I was at my worst time of my life. I was dreadful. I hated everything. I was depressed. I hated. I was like becoming like a Satanist. You know, I was like, God, Satan. I don't care. This is just an avatar. This is creation. I'm just gonna go make it. At the end of the day, I was a stupid kid going through a tough time trying to be edgy.
In total, he would apologize for this thing 3 whole times. But despite that, just months later, he would make another Amanda avatar of that caliber and publicly make a Discord post about it. And unfortunately, this isn't even the end of the story. Sonic decided to make multiple Discord servers of inappropriate nature with almost no moderation or verification of age at all. And he also decided to send inappropriate material to people not of age into a group chat, and even admitted to it on video.
Technically, I did. And I don't mean to, because again, all I was trying to do was to send somebody a shock file. Yeah, they was minors, they was like 17.
He basically did it because of shock value. And similar to creating not appropriate VR models, he also made entire VR worlds. He built maps based on spicy games by using assets from them. And the VR world was supposed to be 18+, which would be fine in itself. As long as everybody involved is an adult, it's all good. But within 4 days after his VR chat world was public, the age limit was dropped to 15+. There were no entry barriers and no filters anymore. This prompted VRChat to actually ban his worlds, but his maps would just be re-uploaded by his friends, while Sonic would simply return under different usernames again. And to top it off, Sonic also interacted with a Twitter account known for posting drawn content of characters, again not of age. And they were drawn in a way that you can imagine isn't very appropriate. But according to him, that was merely a coincidence after all.
This was one of my friends named Radio Bloodstar. He was a minor. I followed him because he wanted me to send me a video of him talking to his friends on VRChat. I followed him, and I got it. I didn't unfollow him because, honestly, I didn't need to. Turns out, I'll come back to his shit, his thing, and this child.
He didn't know what the account posted, and it was run by his friend. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of Sonic Owo. But as of right now, in 2025, Sonic has publicly made a final video explaining how he found God and feels regret for all the things he did, saying it is now a new chapter of his life.
I'm sorry for the people I hurt, and I hope that you see me as a better man. And I hope that one day, in your heart, you can forgive me. Be well. God bless you all.
And also on his Twitter, he regularly posts Bible quotes, and it seems like he's turned into more of a wholesome person of himself. Let's all hope this is true for once. This next person, however, ran a whole cult in VRChat and exploited every single member without regret.
I don't roll about my guilt, so I know you might be scared to kill an actual person. It's up to you. I know for a fact I'm doing it again. It's too fun.
It's late August 2022, and a YouTuber by the name of Brandom FM drops a video exposing a cult disguised as a guild on VRChat. It's called the Dark Guild, and it all began with a single person, a trans woman named Alyssa Afton. In early 2021, the so-called Dark Guild, a VRChat community, springs to life under the leadership of Alyssa. And it starts off looking just like an ordinary fantasy roleplay group, with a Discord server and meetings held through their VRChat worlds. Now the Dark Guild actually grows in size relatively quickly, and new people just keep joining. And due to that fact, Alyssa manages it by splitting the groups into regions, like the European sector, where members can lead their own server for European users. And not long after, the guild welcomes users of all ages to hang out and chat in a friendly and safe environment. But with many innocent and young users joining, thinking it's a fun place to be in, they don't realize they've stepped into something they'll regret for the rest of their lives. Upon being invited in the guild by Alyssa, a contract is given to them to sign, and it states once they do, they're part of the Dark Guild for their entire lives. The guild's problems become theirs, and theirs become the guild's, and they're actually asked to help find missing people, not just characters in a game, but real people who've gone missing in real life. Some cases that have actually been abandoned by the real police. And the members of the guild are given two ways to help. They can either work behind the scenes by doing things like doxing people and digging up their usernames and addresses, or they can help in the field by tracking down the so-called criminals in real life, either to get arrested or to actually end them. And Alyssa expects full commitment, with a contract saying that they must give their life and soul for the sake of the guild. And there's also this thing called the yearly guild games, which the members are forced to join. Their mission is to recruit new members and stay loyal as things get inevitably darker. And there's even a promise of getting paid by the guild, but only if they prove that they're useful. Now, a lot of underage users sign the contract thinking it's harmless, and at the end of the day it is, since the contract isn't actually a legal one. But because of their age, they don't really know that. Months pass after the guild's foundation, and while the guild looks like a fun hangout place, on the surface, multiple users are already being exploited and manipulated by Alyssa behind the scenes. At first, she decides to talk to a couple of them in private, a lot, and over time, these conversations get more explicit.
Morning, cutie. I'm home alone. Now send... Excuse me? You heard me, lol. What?
And that is not the only time she demanded such things. It gets to a point where Alyssa manipulates them into sending videos and engaging in inappropriate activities with her on VR. Now you have to keep in mind, Alyssa is a full-grown adult doing this. Following this, she takes another user as a victim of her predatory behavior, demanding that they participate in an inappropriate roleplay, also known as an ERP, and she even holds wedding ceremonies in the guild, leaving almost everyone confused about why she's marrying guild members right in front of them, considering their age. But since their leader always acts this way, people start to see it as normal, at least inside their little bubble, which is the guild itself. And somebody who used to be inside the guild even reveals that Alyssa tried to be violent in VR. She pressured the informant to develop phantom touch, which lets someone feel the sense of touch in VR. And she did that so she could hurt them online. But it doesn't stop there. She claims that she ended 5 lives herself. And whether it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. The claim alone terrifies the members to a point that some of them start to fear Alyssa and regret ever joining the guild. And this would go on for quite a while until in early 2022, some of Alyssa's victims reach out to Brandon, who made the video about it. And he eventually actually goes undercover and exposes the whole guild. And after millions of people watch the video and see Alyssa's behavior, the Discord server gets deleted and the guild itself eventually disappears. This next person is probably one of the most disturbing people out there.
I do not have a thing for humans. I am more attracted to dogs.
This is hypnotist Sappho, also known as Valerie. At the time, she was a 21-year-old, relatively small content creator in the furry community. And in the summer of 2021, she would start making content in VR chat, doing hypnosis or quote-unquote therapy sessions. With these therapy sessions ranging from group sessions with multiple people to one-on-one things. And within these sessions, some would be appropriate and safe for work, and some would be very non-safe for work. According to herself, she would often go up to people in VR chat and purr, kiss, and tease them without much regard, because according to her, she has a very affectionate personality, making a lot of the people around her uncomfortable. She, however, would take the innocent therapy sessions and upload them on her YouTube channel, which is how she was able to grow her following. This was Sappho on the surface level though, just a VR chat person doing hypnosis. Behind the scenes though, she would meet Gray over VR chat, somewhere between July and September. A teenager who most definitely wasn't of age. They would first start talking more regularly on Discord after they met on VR chat, but as time passed, it would escalate to them cuddling online, where she would position herself in the role of a mother within their Discord chats and on VR chat. And unfortunately, it would not stay at cuddling sessions. These VR meetups would turn inappropriately really quickly, and considering Gray's age, this was very disturbing. Fortunately though, as time passed, Gray eventually realized what was going on. I mean, it was kind of borderline illegal, and so he decided to report the situation to the admins of the specific VR chat world they visited. And since there was plenty of footage that I can't be showing backing this up, Sappho would not only be banned from the worlds in VR chat, but would also be permanently banned on the VR chat Discord. And I wish I could say this would be the end, but it's far from it. Following this ban, Sappho decided to create her own Discord server, with one of the Discord channels being solely dedicated to drawn images of animals in an inappropriate way. One of the mods, called Matcha Tiger, decided to confront Sappho on this, essentially asking if she was a person who was attracted to animals. But she would go on and say that she only respected the community as a quote-unquote therapist and doesn't think of it as anything wrong. After Matcha decided to come out with this chat and leak their conversation, Sappho decided to come out herself with her own statement. On September 11th, 2021, Sappho would post a video titled "Coming Out About Things," which was a 36-minute rant where she admits to being attracted to animals. And she tries to justify her love for animals by comparing it to the LGBTQ community, saying that they used to be much less accepted than nowadays, which was the same for her. Which is of course not the best comparison, since animals can't consent. This video would gain her a ton of backlash from all corners of the internet, including the furry community. But Sappho wouldn't step down and make an apology video, but she doubled down instead. Skipping over her response music video to the haters, she would start an organization called Engagement for Tolerance and Acceptance North America, short ZNA, a group that was supposed to act as a safe space for people like her to meet and talk. But this organization would crumble less than 2 months later, due to somebody within the group laundering the donation funds into their own wallet. And this still wouldn't be the end of Sappho's journey though. You gotta know, Sappho first denied all the allegations of being attracted to people not of age and doing stuff with them. But on December 13th, Sappho would admit on Twitter to being a MAP, which stands for Minor Attracted Person, by making multiple posts saying that the age of consent is an iffy thing. Not surprisingly, this would lead to her Twitter account being suspended, while she would later also be caught talking inappropriately to other people not of age, including exchanging explicit images and voice messages. Now, according to Sappho herself, the reason why she is the way she is stems from her troubling childhood, where her stepfather, among other individuals, would treat her very badly. But if that's actually true, nobody really knows. And last but not least, let's talk about the people from the brony community. People, mostly grown men, who are a fan of the series My Little Pony. Most people who see My Little Pony are inspired to be more positive in life, but instead, the bronies use the show to justify fascism and mass murder. Since the very start of the brony community on 4chan, it has had a problem with attracting the worst people out there. There have been multiple articles written by sites such as The Atlantic and the Rolling Stone about how the bronies have a problem. And in 2017, during the April Fool's Day event, where 4chan merged the My Little Pony and politics board, we saw some horrifying posts.
Sure, he made the wrong choice, but he made it for the right reasons. He was trying to help his friends. We've all done something silly for a friend, right? Who would Austrian Painter's favorite pony be? Probably Pinky, because he was fond of confections and would have admired her positive attitude.
But this was just the start, and things were about to get much worse. In 2012 on Tumblr, a user called Buttercup Do started making posts about how My Little Pony is a utopian society because it allows fascist ideals. And just over 7 years later, 2 years after the April Fool's Day incident, these writings had gained a cult following. And this actually led to the post being published in a book called My Nationalist Pony. Its description reads,
"The cartoon series My Little Pony is beloved of little girls and grown men alike. In My Nationalist Pony, brony blogger Buttercup Drew gives a new rightist reading to My Little Pony, arguing that in addition to its wholesome stories of friendship and self-acceptance, the series is implicitly Eurocentric, pagan, and deeply conservative."
And just to give you an idea of how horrible this book is, there are chapters such as Jesus Christ vs. Celestia and full The book also has a chapter on Martin Luther King, where he says some really questionable things. He goes on to argue that Equestria, which is the fictional kingdom and the main setting for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, was a utopia because all the ponies were ethnically homogeneous, and they resisted the influence of foreign cultures. He also said in an interview of a white nationalist website that the show represents friendship-based European ethnocentrism, and the white nationalists loved every bit of it. Greg Johnson, author of the White Nationalist Manifesto, said this about the book.
My Nationalist Pony, Buttercup Drew's Tumblr blog on the most iconic children's cartoon My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, is a masterpiece of culture jamming. He reads the stories as allegories, teaching perennial truths about race, heredity, caste, differences, self-actualization, virtue, and the divine. And he does it all without a hint of irony.
But while this was extremely weird, things got even worse as the next case actually drove a family insane.
Holy shit, that's fucking cursed. Jesus. I wouldn't save that to my phone.
This entire story revolves around the pony called Stellar Eclipse. It is the original character of Sylvain Nicolas Levasseur Portelance. Sylvain was born on July 9th, 1996, in Simcoe, Ontario, Canada. And right from the start, it was clear that there was something terribly wrong with him. Sylvain always had tremors in his body, even when he was just a baby. He started walking between 16 to 18 months of age, but would just constantly fall as if someone was tripping him on purpose. But as he grew older, he found out that he had spinal muscular atrophy type 3, and suddenly everything made sense. But it also meant that he was cursed to always struggle when it comes to day-to-day tasks like walking or climbing stairs. But his illness had one silver lining. He was approached by the Make-A-Wish Foundation and could have anything he wanted. And Sylvain was actually a longtime fan of My Little Pony. So for his wish, he chose to have a pony called Stellar Eclipse, who would be his own original character in the universe. Stellar Eclipse is a male Pegasus who appears in season 4 of the show. He walks with a wheelchair cart and appears as a trader of Discord-shaped lamps at the Rainbow Falls Traders Exchange. Since then, he hasn't had any other appearances, but Sylvain was extremely happy that he was able to be part of the show nonetheless. Sylvain's story is undeniably tragic, and considering this, most people would treat Stellar Eclipse with much more respect than any other background pony. But instead, as soon as the brony community saw Stellar Eclipse, they decided it would be good clopping material. And if you aren't familiar with the term, clopping is the brony equivalent of playing with yourself in an explicit way. Some of the community members would go on to create heavy graphic content of the character, and when Sylvain's family found out about this, none of them were happy. This was Sylvain's one and only wish, and it was ruined in this way. Marie-Anne, Sylvain's mother, even posted on this issue.
Sylvain is years old, suffers from spinal muscular atrophy, and is a minor. Please remember that this was his pony, this was his beauty mark, this was his voice, and this was his wish granted from Make-A-Wish and DHX. He does not want his character defamed or degraded in any shape or form. Please be kind and see his pony for what he is, someone just like you and me.
But unfortunately, this did nothing to stop them, and more explicit content just kept getting made. Eventually, the Levasseur family was forced to accept that this was the way of the brony community and do their best to move on from the situation. Now, while this showed how insensitive the brony community could be, the next case goes straight into illegal territory and could have caused people to be jailed.
Do you want to go do this again? Probably not.
This story starts at an innocent convention called the Bay Area Brony Spectacular Con. While most bronies and young fans of the show came for events like the Hoof Wrestling Rumble and panels like How to Draw a Pony, some visited the convention as vendors or to promote their own events. In Babs Con's vendor hall, a separate fandom convention, Sacramento's SAG Anime had set up a table to promote their own con. The SAG Anime table was run by the con staff and supporters, and according to Babs Con staff, they were located just 3 tables away from BabCon's own convention registration table. But when an 8-year-old girl ran up to the SAG Anime table asking if she could hide, the SAG Anime staffers quickly realized that things were seriously wrong. After the con, a woman at the table named Callie, who had a Tumblr account under the name Saint Cheshire, described the incident in a post.
We met a little girl who was there with her family. She got a button drawn at our booth told us all about her favorite ponies, and was overall just too damn cute. She had a My Little Pony lanyard filled with pins she's gotten in the vendor's room, and gave me a Fluttershy pin because she liked my cosplay. She ended up just hanging around with us for a while and being super cute. We call her Babby because she's 11 and precious.
So far, this sounds completely normal and a great experience for Babby. But things were about to get much worse, as Babby was going to have one of the most horrifying experiences of her life.
The next day, she runs up to the booth, terrified, and asks if she can please hide under our table for a few minutes. Turns out a dude had been following her around the con all day and tried to get her to come to his hotel room alone. She tells us she thought he was okay at first because he was wearing a My Little Pony shirt, but she didn't want to go anywhere with him, and he made her uneasy. At one point, after she'd refused, he grabbed her arm in the elevators and tried to get her to follow him. She ran and now just wants somewhere to hide.
This girl was asked to come to the hotel room of an adult brony, completely alone. There's no telling what kind of horrible things would have happened if she had really gone with him. But he wasn't about to give up that easily.
We tell her, of course, hurry her behind our booth and station ourselves around her, because she's 11 years old, and all of us are prepared to physically attack the human trash heap who tries to with her. Eventually, this very large dude strolls by, very obviously looking around, and she quietly points him out to us. At this point, I'm ready to set him on fire, but when I asked if she needs me to go report him, she shakes her head. She doesn't want to get in trouble or make anyone mad. We see him a few more times over the course of the day, because he keeps meandering over to our booth and just casually looking around. Eventually, he actually stops to take a flyer from our table and asks us a question, and we coldly send him on his way. We start sending a co-worker with Babby whenever her parents aren't around, because otherwise she's not safe.
Now, while the SAG anime staffers protected Babby, they unfortunately completely failed to realize the implication of what Babby had told them. This man was a possible predator, roaming freely in a con filled with young little girls. And no one from the SAG anime team alerted the BabsCon security that they had a predator on their hands. But they're not the only responsible party in this situation. A child can't just wander around a con on their own. So where were the parents during all of this? They actually knew that their 8-year-old daughter was being pursued by a child predator, and they still didn't do anything to protect her. According to the SAG anime staff, the parents had been informed of the situation, but still allowed Babby to stay at the con despite the man stalking her. But eventually, Babby's mother sent a letter of clarification to BabsCon.
Hi, I am Babby's mom. My adult daughter and myself have some physical disabilities, so it was a challenge to keep up with the kids. To be clear, I was never informed about any kind of incident involving my daughter while at BabsCon. She didn't want to tell me because I wouldn't let her out on her own anymore. I was at the table several times that day and no one said anything to me about all of this. I would have contacted security and tried to find this guy.
The SAG anime staffers had claimed that the parents had been informed about the man and about the incident where he tried to get Babby to come up to his hotel room. But now the mother was actually claiming that she was never informed by the staff or by Babby until the con actually ended. But things were about to get even more confusing.
My daughter exaggerated about the elevator. He never put a hand on her, and she was never alone with him. She was on a very crowded elevator with him. We've had a serious discussion about all of this, and the importance of not exaggerating, and not hiding this kind of thing from mom or security. We loved our time at BabsCon, and the safety we felt is probably why I let my guard down. With the hundreds of people in attendance, this was a slight accident.
This makes the story even more unclear and leaves us in doubt about what actually happened. But the most important thing to note is that Babby was in real danger. And as we'll see in the later videos, the brony community has many examples of adult male fans taking advantage of younger people. But while the man didn't succeed in getting Babby into his room, the next person on my list succeeded in getting a plushie into a world of nightmares.
Having a waifu is one thing. Having a plush that you bring everywhere that you can hear talk to you is another.
This is just a normal Twilight Sparkle plushie, and most people who look at it would think about hugging or petting the plushie. But instead, many of the members of the brony community add suspicious holes near the tails of these plushies, and then use them in explicit ways. But even among the bronies, Jin1515 took it to a whole nother level. He has a deviant art page, which has some innocent pictures of himself and a Twilight Sparkle plushie. But if you dig just a little deeper, it's easy to find some weird pictures, like this one, where Twilight Sparkle is photographed next to a hookah, suggesting that she smokes. But this is still tame considering some of the other stuff Jin1515 has said and done. Around 10 years ago, Jin decided to write a long message to another user who went by the name of Kevin Sano. Kevin Sano is an adult material artist who mainly draws furry art. And the most important thing to note about him is that he gets explicit My Little Pony fan arts for his birthday, in addition to the ones he actually makes himself. Now, one of these fan arts featured Twilight, and when Jin saw it, he actually freaked out and made an extremely long post defending the character. In the post, he asked the artist to stop making adult content about Twilight and gave the following reason.
The reason I asked this is that Twilight is my fiance, and we're planning on getting married next June or July should everything go as planned financially speaking. And yes, I have actually found a wedding chapel that will let me marry someone that most people would consider a fictional character.
Just to be clear, this is a fully grown man claiming that a Twilight plushie is his wife. In the post, he does have some ideas of how absurd all of this sounds, but he doubles down on just how real Twilight is to him.
And I talk about her as if she is Twilight, because to me, she very much is. When I look at her, I see Twilight sparkle. When I talk with her, I'm talking to Twilight. When I hold her in my arms and kiss her, there are no doubts in my mind that it's the mare I love, whose lips are pressed against mine. And every morning when I open my eyes and see her head on the pillow next to mine, with her gorgeous violet eyes staring back at me, I can't help but wonder how I ever got to be so lucky as to have a partner as smart, funny, beautiful, and all around wonderful as her.
He even goes on to explain that they have dates together and have real intimacy. It's important to still remember, this is all a comment on an explicit artwork of Twilight Sparkle. And it doesn't stop there, as he continues to talk about fidelity in his relationship with Twilight Sparkle.
Don't get me wrong though, this isn't a jealousy thing. I'm very secure in my relationship. I know without question that Twilight is just as faithful to me as I am to her. She's actually sitting on the couch next to me reading while I type this. She is very real to me, and I know she's not sneaking out in the middle of the night to do some freaky stuff with some famous artist.
He goes on to explain the way Twilight acts in the bedroom, along with her preferences, saying that she's very vanilla and is unhappy with being depicted differently in the art. Just to give you an idea of how horrifying this man is having explicit relations with a plushie of a fictional character. And the worst part is that this is still just scratching the surface when it comes to how depraved bronies can be, as we'll see very soon. Now let's take a deep dive into the worst of the worst, people who actually committed crimes. This next person on the list was taking advantage of a year-old.
I went to the basement and then my mom came down with me to the basement because she doesn't want me to be famous on YouTube. She wants me to have a job, and I don't want to have a job. I want to be a neat.
Herbert Kenneth Huachaka was born on January 11th, 2005, and though he showed great promise during his youth, he's currently unemployed and lives with his mother. He often goes by the nickname Timmy, but unlike most unemployed 20-year-olds, Timmy actively advocates for doing explicit things with young people and animals. But before we get into that, we need to understand his brony persona. Dance Burst is a copy of the character called Sunburst, and instead of accepting that it's a copy, Timmy actually made a whole timeline to fit his character into the show. And he genuinely believes that there are portals in this world that lead into the world of My Little Pony. According to him, Dance Burst is Sunburst's brother, and he's traveled to him multiple times. On these travels, he's an upstanding citizen and does brotherly things with Sunburst. But as with most illusions, he keeps the details of these travels vague, so he can keep believing in his fantasy. He also actually believes that he is an actual pony. He refers to himself and others as ponies, and also calls their hands and feet hoofs. He's also a heavy advocate for Zuf, which is how he justifies his love for these ponies. But it gets even worse, where he goes as far as to say that children are capable consenters. He mainly actually got into the spotlight when a user called Tibbles made this post.
Hey, I wanted to formally announce, I don't accept in my space. Hate them. I would have my ass handed to me in the community guidelines if I said everything I think about them. In no uncertain terms, perish.
At this point, most people would simply respect her wishes and move on. But instead, Dan Spurs decided to post a video about it. The now private video titled Dan Spurs Debunks the Immorality of Sophia is over 25 minutes in length and goes over the disgusting reasons why Dan Spurs thinks that Sophia is justified. And the thumbnail of the video was a dog licking peanut butter off of a pony character, and it just clearly showed just one sign of how deranged Dan Spurs was at this point. But the contents of the video were even worse. He categorizes this video into two parts: why Sophia is not morally wrong and why Sophia should be legal. Starting with the first part, this is what he had to say.
Why is that any different than eating an animal? I'm not against people eating animals. The anti-zoo reply that we have to eat animals for nutrition, and even if we didn't, vegan stuff would be more expensive. But what if this weren't true? Here's my main claim. Even if all humans had readily available 100% nutritious bland tofu, it wouldn't be wrong or immoral for a human to hunt and kill an ostrich, either because they like the taste of its meat or because they enjoy the thrill of the hunt.
It's clear that Dan Spurs put extensive effort into this video and presented himself as a philosopher trying to explain a complex argument, but all the information he presents in the video is just extremely horrifying and warped. A few minutes later in the video, he tries to prove that a human's pleasure is more important than an animal's bodily autonomy and mental well-being. He goes as far as to say it's an insult to God not to engage with animals, because in the hierarchy of beings, humans are above other animals and should be able to enforce their will upon them. According to him, emotional damage is not based on morality, so violating an animal causes less harm than killing it. And since killing animals is perfectly okay, violating animals is morally right.
Killing an animal for its taste is a bigger harm to the animal than raping it for pleasure would be. Some say that non-mutilative rape would somehow traumatize an animal so much that it would be worse than killing them. Well, we know this isn't true, because animals who are raped don't become
He takes this one step further when he explains why placing an animal's will above a human's will debases God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth.
God made a natural hierarchy of all living things: bacteria, plants, invertebrates, non-human mammals, humans, angels, and God. To place an animal's will before a human's will in any moral consideration is to debase God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth.
Once he uploaded the video, he was quickly met with a lot of backlash, especially for his horrifying views regarding the but he always used some random argument to deal with any criticism, like this one. But it gets even worse. I already stated earlier that he refers to himself as a pony, and it unfortunately doesn't stop there. He also refers to women as mares, which is an adult female horse. And most disturbing of all, he refers to children as foals, which is a young horse. And in this Twitter post from July 2024, he acts like the ponies are real people and says some disturbing things.
My condolences to the husband. You gotta keep your mares in check. Stallions. Technically no husband. Missy along with my other cuties are from the king himself. He does like to be tied down to one, it seems. Would you like to see all my sweet babies? As Liam's royal inspector, I demand you present these cute foals to me for an official inspection.
And the replies just get even worse. When someone simply typed "No," Dan Spurs responded with,
"What kind of reply is that? Did you type it with one hand? I don't understand why you think you can do anything about my foal. Equestria doesn't have the same draconian age of consent laws in this dimension's human world. You'd know if you'd portaled there like I have."
But his disgusting activities don't stop there. On July 25th, 2024, he defended MAPS, otherwise known as minor attracted people.
These people say that the minor was grouped into doing what? Being platonic friends? This buzzword's used so often, it loses its meaning. Gets watered down to acted somewhat creepily, like gaslighting, being watered down into disagreeing, lying to me.
And he did make another huge post defending a person who took advantage of minors. Sawtooth was a self-proclaimed map and had taken advantage of a 14-year-old, which led to psychological trauma for the girl.
Let's look at this post that you sent. In her supposed expose of Sawtooth Waves, she said that she was the one who told Sawtooth that she had a crush on them. Why? Why would you do this and then make an entire spiel about him being a predator when you really told him that you had a crush on them?
But there's still more. Worst of all, the infamous brony went on to take advantage of a year-old himself. This was actually kept under wraps, and all that is known is that it happened on a Discord server. He managed to get the girl to agree to come over to his place without her parents' knowledge. Luckily though, he was caught before the meet could happen, but the current state of the girl is now not known. Now this next case gets even worse.
It's probably wrong of me to be attracted to you, but I can't help it, as long as it's kept quiet and as long as you're comfortable. Is that okay?
Unlike Dan Burst, who wasn't popular at all, Mando Pony was famous in the community before his crimes even came to light. Mando Pony, otherwise known as Andrew Stein, was a rock musician who made many songs and got a decent amount of views. His songs ranged from Five Nights at Freddy's to songs for gamers, along with My Little Pony. He started experimenting with chiptune music for the show back in 2011, with chiptune being a type of music that has the same vibe as old video games. It began with him restyling the main theme song before going on to more original tunes. And he would actually hit his peak with Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's easy to assume that after a few unsuccessful years, he would just move on. But instead, he continued making videos and interacting with members of the My Little Pony fandom. Now at this point, he's a married man, and while he isn't hugely popular, he is loved a lot by his fans. But everything changed once an account named Exposing Andy Stein was created. Created in July 2020, this account started to post horrifying screenshots of Andy texting younger people. And it becomes even more disgusting when you realize that Andrew Stein is again married. Unfortunately, the account that had all of the information no longer exists, and I couldn't even find it with the Wayback Machine. But I was able to find the details of one particular victim who was aged. This victim was extremely important because she had proof that it was actually Andrew texting her and not someone impersonating him, primarily because she had exposed pictures of him.
I've been meaning to say, yeah, thank you for keeping all of this private. It is probably wrong of me to be attracted to you, but I can't help it, just as long as it's kept quiet. And as long as you're comfortable, is that okay? And it won't progress beyond just flirts and lewd moments, lol. Yeah, it's really no issue for me. I respect your privacy like you'd respect mine.
Now once this case came forward, many other women in the community also posted disturbing screenshots of their interactions with Andrew. Just to give you an idea of how horrible this guy is, one of the victims was as young as years old when she was preyed on by him. She was also homeless at the time, making it even worse.
This was the snapshot that Andrew Stein gave me, and the account he used to send explicit pictures. I was homeless, scared, and lost. And you took advantage of that, of you being my idol, telling me not to tell anyone.
Now while the screenshots themselves aren't enough to prove her story, the Twitter account has a lot of tweets of her worshipping Andrew. And it's clear that this wasn't one-sided, since he liked one of her posts too. But unfortunately, he deleted all the proof that the girl had.
This was the only thing saved in the DM so far. Everything else was deleted.
In another incident, he flirted with a year-old and even drew explicit pictures of her.
He kept sending me pics and stuff, and his explicit art. I eventually told him to stop sending it to me, as I felt really uncomfortable, and you know, it's not really my thing. But that's not all he would send. Oh, also explicit drawings that followed my smut scene.
But it gets even worse, as the account made another post explaining exactly what drawings were being talked about.
Some of Andy's art, 3 of them including the year-old victim. The last image includes him, the girl, and Nathan Sharp as furries on stage, with Nate daring the girl to kiss him. And no, Nate did not consent to this drawing.
To give you some context, Nathan Sharp is another singer in the gamer music scene. He and Andrew worked together on a couple of songs, and apparently that gave Andrew the right to draw Nate however he wanted. It's clear as day that Andrew Stein was using his position as a somewhat famous music creator on YouTube to take advantage of these younger girls. But while all of this was coming to light, Andrew was already planning a way to get out of this predicament. He suddenly made a comment about his mental health and then silently closed all of his accounts. He would also go as far as disabling comments.
After speaking with my therapist, psychiatrist, and more, I'm stepping away from social media and any spotlight. I am not well. I am seeking help. My family and friends are supporting me until I'm healthy. I wish you all peace and joy. Thank you.
And he would actually hold the silence for a year, but finally in 2021 he would break it with a statement of himself and his legal team.
When claims that I had a criminal relationship with some of my fans were made last year, they were thoroughly investigated by the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in coordination with the LAPD. They did so for many months and independently concluded that no crimes had ever taken place. No taking advantage of, no no relations with any minor whatsoever.
To quickly summarize what he actually says in this huge letter, he claims that everything was baseless and that these rumors have ruined his life. He does say that some of his interactions with fans may have been insensitive and too personal, but he himself closes this chapter by saying he will continue his hiatus and move on with his life. So, despite the huge amount of evidence, it's confirmed that Andrew didn't face any consequences for his actions. But even this action is pale in comparison when it comes to the brony who decided to attack a whole building.
He worked here until sometime last fall. We don't know why his employment ended or why he came back here last night with evil intentions.
It's April 15, 2021. 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hall, a former FedEx employee, enters a company building with a rifle. And just a few minutes later, he would pass away inside that building. But to understand how he got there, we first need to look at Brandon's life leading up to this moment. Especially considering the fact that this wasn't even the first time that he was publicly problematic. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Everything started going downhill when Brandon's father took his own in 2004. At the time, Brandon wasn't even 3 years old, and growing up without a father meant that he had a lot of behavioral issues, and they became prominent around the 4th grade, which led to him going to behavioral therapy sessions for them. Now, in these sessions, he was diagnosed with a disruptive behavior disorder and anxiety disorder at the age of 10, and he was diagnosed with autism just a few years later in 2015. Eventually, his behavior deteriorated to a point where police had to be called to the home on at least 2 occasions. He couldn't even attend school and graduate, but that was the least of his worries, because in 2013, at the age of 11, Brandon was actually arrested for attacking his own mother and slightly injuring her. But considering his young age and troubled background, he was only sentenced to probation and counseling. But even that didn't help Brandon deal with the darkness in his mind. In March 2020, Brandon's mother contacted the local authorities and warned them about her son's intent to pass away by a cop and his purchase of a shotgun the day before. Police quickly responded to the home and took him to the hospital, and while being placed in handcuffs, Brandon told the officers to turn off his computer since he didn't want anyone to see what was on it. Now, luckily, an officer who had gone upstairs to seize the shotgun observed what he identified as white supremacist websites on Brandon's computer. This, combined with the severity of the incident, caused Brandon to be placed in an immediate detention mental health temporary hold by the Indianapolis Police Department, but he was actually released less than 2 hours later. Now, just a month later, in April 2020, the FBI questioned Brandon about the websites, but unfortunately the investigation was later closed due to insufficient evidence of any criminal violation or a racially motivated extremist ideology. This meant that Brandon was a free man even after all of this. He could do whatever he wanted. Now, his original plan to pass away by a cop wasn't possible anymore, considering that the police never returned his actual gun. But that's when he had another idea. In July and September, Brandon purchased 2 rifles legally from a licensed gun store. Now, the important thing to notice that under Indiana's red flag law, Brandon could have been prevented from making firearm purchases for at least 6 months after his temporary mental health detainment, if a hearing had been scheduled with the judge 14 days after they took away his gun. However, Marion County prosecutors decided not to schedule such a hearing, since they believed that the authorities had already achieved the law's objective. After all, like I mentioned earlier, Brandon never got his shotgun back. Prosecutor Ryan Mears also said that if his officer had proceeded with the hearing and lost, considering that Brandon had been treated by medical professionals but not prescribed any medication, they would have been forced to return the gun to him. And at the time, they believed that as long as Brandon didn't have a weapon, he couldn't hurt anyone. But they'd find out just how wrong they were just a few days later. This brings us back to the start of this case, April 15th, 2021. 19-year-old Brandon is outside the FedEx building with 2 rifles he'd purchased. Brandon actually worked at this FedEx facility from August to October 2020, before being terminated for being absent too often. This meant that he knew the layout by heart. But before he could commit any mass unalivings, he used his Facebook account to make the last few posts of his life.
I hope that I can be with Applejack in the afterlife. My life has no meaning without her. If there's no afterlife and she isn't real, then my life never mattered anyways.
Now Applejack is again one of the fictional characters in the My Little Pony universe, and he made his last post dedicated to her. Although not clearly documented, it seems like his entire life revolved around this character. From there, he arrived at the facility during a shift change, spoke to security, and then went back to his vehicle. He checked his guns, made sure that they had enough ammo, and braced himself. Soon after, Brandon exited his vehicle and began firing at employees in the parking lot. He then proceeded to the facility's entrance where he resumed attacking. Brandon then tried to progress further into the building, but he was actually blocked by a full-height turnstile gate. So he instead fired shots at employees on the other side of the turnstile before exiting the building again. Then in the parking lot, he repeated history. Now a different employee actually fired at Brandon with his own handgun, but missed. And eventually Brandon was satisfied enough and walked back into the building to end his own there. The attack lasted less than 4 minutes, but the damage was already done. There were 9 fatalities in the attack, including Brandon. In the end, the FBI concluded that the attack was an act of taking his own and murdering people, intended to demonstrate his masculinity and capability while fulfilling a final desire to experience taking the lives of others. Now that leaves us with one major question though. Why was he talking about Applejack right before the attack? After the incident, the authorities found his laptop, which contained the answer to this question.
According to the Wall Street Journal, which cited internal memos circulated by Facebook in the wake of the attack, the gunman primarily used his Facebook accounts to discuss his love for My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, a children's cartoon series featuring magical ponies. Adult fans of the show are often referred to as bronies. The gunman posted about his love of a tawny pony named Applejack, one of the main characters of the franchise, less than an hour before the rampage. The gunman also reportedly had a history of posting far-right content, such as a meme suggesting Jesus had been reincarnated as an Austrian painter.
So Brandon was a big part of the brony community, which explains his love for Applejack, and the community also gave him an environment where he could post far-right content, which we saw in the very first case. All in all, Brandon had a bad start with losing his dad at a young age, but being part of the brony fandom most likely made things worse. But even this can't compare to the next case on our list, which is probably the most horrifying one.
What's going on here? Like, can anyone tell me what's going on?
Okay, so Toon, we're gonna preface all of this with you're in trouble.
Since the rise of My Little Pony and animation content as a whole, YouTube has become home to a number of channels that discuss and criticize this very content. One such channel was made by Zach, better known as Toon Critic Y2K. He created this channel on May 3rd, 2012, and he could have not made it at a better time, since this was when the brony community went from being a niche 4chan subculture to a full-blown fandom. However, while we do know that Zach got extremely popular at one point, all of his YouTube content has been wiped off the face of the internet. Not much information is available on the Internet Archive either. However, from the few archives that do exist, we know that in 2014 he'd garnered over 3,000 subscribers, and in 2015 he was making $170 per written review or vlog on Patreon. We also know that by 2017, just 3 years later, he had 17,000 subscribers, but often struggled to break 1,000 views on a video. Now it's clear that Jack didn't achieve the same level of success as other creators, and couldn't have been making his primary income from his YouTube channel. However, he was still extremely well connected with other brony creators, and was part of a big Skype group called the Rift Cafe, which describes itself as a collaborative storyline made up by the brony analysis community.
The Rift Cafe is a meeting place beyond any other realm, where creatures from all walks of life can come to have a drink or relax for a while. Residing within the Rift, this cafe had its humble beginnings as a brony Skype group, dubbed the Commentary Collective, later renamed the Rift Cafe, and over time evolved into a shared lore between multiple YouTube channels.
And we get some more details about Toon Critic from his page on the Rift Cafe wiki, such as illustrations of his brony character and backstory behind it. Toon Critic Y2K is a red Pegasus pony. He's often referred to as an edgelord as a result of his famous red and black color scheme. After doing battle with his alter ego, Cartoon Z, Toon's body was forced to regenerate. He sports a leather jacket, goggles, and a goatee. Now apparently his alter ego Cartoon Z took over his channel from time to time to terrorize others in the brony analysis community. And because of this he would gain horse fame, which is the brony equivalent of being a celebrity. And this meant he would take part in popular group projects such as a series called TF2 Analysis. Now this series was a strange crossover in which various creators from the community interacted with each other in the world of the Valve game Team Fortress 2, but every character is still a pony. It has an ongoing story and lore, and the first episode has over 500,000 views. But beneath the exterior of a somewhat famous brony YouTuber, Zach's behavior was becoming erratic. After all, his fame came from trying to psychologically break his fellow creators and friends. But things would take a turn for the worse as allegations came out about him behaving inappropriately at cons. In a video uploaded on his channel, Viva, another brony YouTuber, discusses the major allegations. But these are just some of the few allegations that have come to light, and multiple people in the comments have come forward as well.
My friend was groped by him at a con too. This whole thing is f***ed up, Jesus Christ. It's f***ed up beyond belief, especially how long he's been able to essentially get away with it.
But the worst thing about this whole situation is, most people don't even remember the touching inappropriately allegations, because ultimately it was nothing compared to the heinous nature of Zach's other misdeeds. In 2018, over 500 screenshots surfaced, which showed Zach inappropriately texting a girl. These texts started when the girl was barely while Zach at the same time was already 24 years old, a full decade older. As they get closer, he began doing roleplays with her, and in one of these sessions he said,
"It's just so exciting knowing you're barely legal."
Soon after, he tried to take a step further than just roleplaying as each other's characters.
Well, here's the thing, I'm not asking to be in a relationship with you. When I said go further, I mean a step further than just RPs and teasing, because you are too young to start a relationship. However, I want to explore those other kinds of feelings, more so on the romantic side. Do you get what I'm saying? I want you to know this is all okay, and I want to help you understand all this, but only if you want to go a little further.
He's completely aware of the 10-year difference, but at the same time just doesn't stop interacting inappropriately with this girl and even develops feelings.
Is it weird that I'm attracted to you? Like in what way, if I may ask? Okay, like attracted in the mental and emotional sense. Hey, I'm flattered, really. It's just that for one thing, the 10-year difference, man. XD, I think you're a really great friend. Yeah, a 10-year difference. XD.
But he doesn't stop at texts, going as far as trying to meet with her in real life.
Also, a random little thing I realized, if you're serious about what we can get away with, if I was ever able to meet you in real life, via a con or any other visit, you'd technically take my first kiss in that regard. Oh, how so? Well, I do remember you saying that you wanted to do something like that some time ago. If that's ever possible for me to go to a con, which I'm praying for at this point, XD, and me being completely alright with it, don't think I'd forget that kind of stuff. Fair enough, I think it'd be pretty interesting having you all to myself in a hotel room. I must admit that you're making me morbidly curious about what you would do if that area were to come up. Do you actually want to know? Imagine the roleplays we've done.
But he didn't just stop at pursuing a relationship with her. He even tried to obtain explicit photos.
Would you ever consider modeling? Funny enough, you're not the first person who said that to me. XD, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable before. You didn't, don't worry man. I didn't feel uncomfortable at any point. What makes you say that? About the curiosity of modeling and underwear. Oh, don't worry. I know you didn't have any ill intent. I trust you like that. Unless you did have actual ill intent. Of course not. I think it would be interesting to see you try that. Life's all about taking chances. You'd have nothing to lose. You already have the curves.
The conversation then proceeds to talk about her physical features, and you can probably understand what was said. At this point, it's important to get some background information about the girl. While we don't know her identity, it's clear that she suffers from severe social anxiety and depression. Zach was essentially her only friend, since she couldn't hold any conversations in person. And Zach knows all of this, yet he still continues to push her into relationships and flirty conversations. But thankfully, after letting it go on for 13 months, in December of 2017, he seemingly came to his senses.
Oh, so you were uncomfortable with what we've been doing? Obviously not. I just want to take a break from it. Something didn't feel quite right. I'm curious what you mean by that, but if you don't want to tell me, I won't pry. Up until recently, I thought this was just for fun, but then I realized I'm doing this with a 15-year-old. I gave one of my friends flag for doing this exact same thing.
Now eventually the chats did get leaked, and Zach got the backlash from it from other creators. They put him in a video call and confronted him about it. However, he makes very little attempt to defend his actions, and even more disturbingly, he claims to have done worse things than just that.
We know that We have a lot of solid evidence and concrete proof that you are, or at least what you have done, is people. You have asked for photos of her in nothing but a leather jacket and panties. You have sent her pictures of your only covered in boxes. You've sent her porn. You've done a lot of bad things, Zach.
There have been times where I admit I have done things that are probably worse than this.
And yes, he admits that this wasn't even the first time he had taken advantage of a younger person before, but that ended with the police and had bad consequences. Considering the severity of his actions, there was no way the others could allow Zach to stay in the community. However, considering he'd been a long-time member, his fellow creators gave him 24 hours to turn himself in and leave the community on his own.
At this point, we're just repeating ourselves, but you need to face the music, all right?
We've told you everything we're going to tell you, essentially. It's up to you now, really. You have 24 hours. You can go to the police, or you can do whatever the hell you want. Quite frankly, I don't care.
They would go on to report Zach, but unfortunately no legal consequences came out of this incident. And worst of all, none of this would really bother Zach, at least until he realized it took all of his horse fame away. Zach wasn't really good at his job, and his career depended on his relationship with the other creators and popularity in the community. And even the group call would get leaked on the 26th of February and make headlines on Horse News, which would only make the situation worse for him, as more screenshots were leaked of him defending his behavior.
I will say this. These screen caps, if you've seen them, are not fake. I believe this whole entire story is being twisted in a way to make me look bad. Age of consent laws in the Philippines are 12, from what I was told.
He says that his actions were justified because he's got Filipino boy swagger, despite the fact that his Skype profile blatantly says that he's in Illinois, where the age of consent is 17. After the call was leaked, yet another victim by the name of Abby came out with her own screenshots. This victim first met Zach when he claimed that he wanted to help her out with her YouTube channel, and slowly their conversation progressed from there.
I've been told that my eyes tend to sparkle when I'm happy too. Never would have imagined. Well, you're pretty. Thank you, that's really nice. It's nice to be complimented once in a while. High school isn't exactly the most positive place in Equestria. Yeah, we all know how that feels. I don't want you to think I'm coming on to you or anything.
They would also roleplay, and once again he would push the conversation in an inappropriate direction.
I'll give you a hint. Charismatic, handsome, energetic. And edgy, don't forget edgy. Maybe a little sex.
Now coming back to the call, many people actually didn't agree with how it was handled, mainly that it was too respectful and soft for someone like Toon. Many of the community members made videos critiquing the people confronting Zach. Of these, one of the original creators who went against Zach made a video. In the video, Josh, the one who was speaking softly to Zach, explained the events from behind the scenes. He would further explain his reasons for keeping the story silent till further steps could be taken.
Firstly, Sally did not want to have her name forever linked to this scandal, especially at her age. Secondly, the wiser thing to do would be to hold off on reveals until we had statements prepared so there wouldn't be any misinformation spread.
Dr. Wolf, another creator, posted a video being angry at Josh for talking about forgiveness to Toons. In the same video, Josh explains that this was all a big misunderstanding.
There was a dramatic failure to communicate about what we meant when we said forgiveness, and we take full responsibility for it. Dr. Wolf and I are Christian, different denominations, but still Christians, and as such, we failed to recognize a huge disconnect between our secular and non-secular audiences, and that's not your fault, it's ours. The word forgiveness for most Christians holds a drastically different meaning than for most secular audiences.
Now, despite all of the horrific things, there was a creator called Performance Major who took the side of Zach, but that led to him actually confessing his own explicit behavior.
I roleplay with just about anyone who's willing, and sometimes, if the minors mature enough, I'll roleplay with them too.
He would also say he's only breaking the law because he's above 18, and she's just as guilty. However, after facing severe criticism, he and his opinions disappeared off the face of the internet. Now, despite all of this, no legal action was taken against Zach, primarily because there was no physical contact between him and the girl he took advantage of. This meant that Zach had permission to come back under different usernames. Back in 2019, these included Abreeze72 and Mucha Lucha. He used a second name to get into the Pokemon community, which is also full of young people who can be targets for Zach. The A Breeze account would also stream regularly on Twitch, where you can clearly make out that it's Toons. Now it would be deactivated after it was called out by YouTube creators, but there's still more to the story. His most recent attempt was in July 2024 via a Discord account called Radioactive Mud.
Hi, it's me Vinny. I was one of his friends and victims over the past year or so, and I think it's time I make a proper post to further call him out. Let me reintroduce you to Zach, aka Toon Critic Y2K.
Yes, he continued his behavior, with more victims coming out to talk about him.
I too was a victim of Golden Nova, aka Toon Critic Y2K. He tried to make a move on me back in March, and I knew for a fact that he was sus. He has broke multiple boundaries with a lot of people that I've known, and f***ed over friendships between friend groups.
Now he has gone back into hiding since, and his current status is unknown. But one thing is for sure, most likely until he's locked away or his access to the internet is taken away, Toon Critic Y2K is out there, and probably trying to find more victims to take advantage of.